Chapter 63. The scorching fireball fiercely hit King Yu's face. Then, like a mask, it completely covered her face. A few seconds later, the fire dissipated, but King Yu's face seemed to be burning. "Damn it, you disgusting green-skinned brats! You dare to humiliate this king like this? This king will definitely kill all of you and execute you all." Queen Yu's anger had reached its limit. She attacked the goblins even more fiercely, but the result was that she was even more furious. She attacked the goblins more than 10 times, but she didn't hit the goblins. Instead, she took damage from 10 wolf fang maces and 3 fireballs. Queen Yu's shield energy was close to 200 points. "King Yu, we don't have much time." Gu Han, who was standing on the tree, looked at the time in the system and then jumped down from the tree. "According to my calculations, you can still waste 2 minutes on these pieces of trash. However, I feel that even if I give you another 20 minutes, you probably won't be able to deal with them," Gu Han said with a look of disdain. "Who said that? You despicable person, you dare to look down on this king? This king doesn't even need a minute to get rid of these green-skinned ghosts," King Yu forcefully said. Hey, you two, don't speak. You actually dare to look down on Lord Slime? Can't you see the powerful Lord Slime standing in front of you? Hurry up and offer your flesh to Lord Slime to enjoy." The goblin wizard Slime was very dissatisfied as he declared his existence. "What? Slime?" King Yu looked at Gohan in confusion. "Despicable person, aren't slime a very disgusting type of slimy worm? When did you become a goblin?" "I'll use chaotic reasoning behind you," Gohan suddenly said without answering the question. King Yu was stunned for a moment before immediately reacting. He used chaotic reasoning behind him, and a goblin warrior that tried to sneak up was instantly beheaded. Actually, this is a rather famous joke. The move from the left is the sorrow of parting. Another head flew into the air. It's true that the green-faced wizard is a real goblin wizard, but his name is Slime. Close your eyes and use Don't Taste. The 3 goblin warriors who were about to team up collapsed. "I've heard that he was raised by 7 slimes, so he's called Slimes. One more move, Sorrow of Parting. That's why he's called Slimes. And the last move, Don't Taste." In the time it took for him to explain the name of this goblin wizard, the surrounding dozen or so goblin warriors had actually been completely annihilated under Gu Han's command. In reality, these goblin warriors were all ancient sword saint rank, and with the help of the goblin mages, they were equivalent to intermediate ancient sword saint rank players. If an ordinary ancient sword saint player were to face these goblin warriors head-on, not only would their chances of success be low, but they would also have to waste a lot of time. According to the guide, the best way was to sneak into the room of the goblin mage Slime in the ticket hall and fight him one-on-one. As long as he got rid of the goblin mage, the rest of the goblin warriors would flee and collapse without a fight. However, this instance dungeon had no time requirements, so there was no need to save time. Moreover, with King Yu's famed sword rank, even if he was suppressed, it did not matter. That was why Gohan fought head-on so that King Yu could train his swordsmanship. To achieve this goal, Gohan specially instructed King Yu not to use basic skills to prevent the training result. You. The goblin mage Slime panicked. This was not right. How did that noob sword mistress wipe out his subordinates in the blink of an eye? "Despicable person, you dare to order me around." After killing all the goblin warriors, King Yu was clearly in a good mood. Even though she was still criticizing Gohan, she was smiling like a flower. "There's still 1 minute and 20 seconds. Gohan smiled and pointed at the confused goblin mage Slime. "I'll leave this one to you. My Queen Yu, since you're so strong, 1 minute and 20 seconds should be enough to deal with him." Of course. King Yu raised her head to prevent Gohan from seeing her panicked expression. Unfortunately, her panicked voice betrayed her. "I can kill this slime in 1 minute. You two, you dare to kill Lord Slime's subordinates? You're dead. You're dead. Lord Slime will use a large fireball to kill you." The goblin mage slime raised his magic staff and started chanting an obscure mana language. From the time it took to chant, it was indeed more powerful than the fireball spell. "You fool, you dare to chant a spell in front of me!" Seeing the goblin mage start chanting, King Yu was about to laugh. He really wanted to sleep with a pillow. Under the pressure of that despicable person, Gohan, he could forcefully kill his opponent in 1 minute. However, King Yu didn't have the confidence to hit that skinny and nimble goblin mage. Now, this mage was courting death by wasting a lot of time. He stood still and channeled. Wasn't this meat delivered to him? The happy King Yu's charge sped up. In 2 seconds, he arrived in front of the goblin mage slime. He raised his Gojian sword and chopped down on the goblin mage slime's head. Like a soap bubble, the goblin mage slime's body suddenly shattered and turned into water, disappearing into the air. System notice: you have destroyed the goblin mage slime's water membrane illusion. Water membrane illusion was the ultimate skill of water magic. It allowed the caster to create an illusion of himself. Under the cover of the illusion, the caster would disappear for 3 seconds. It turned out that the goblin mage had been lying to the King of Yu about the great fireball. His true goal was to use the water barrier to escape from the dangerous sword wielder and sword lady. I didn't expect this goblin mage to have some intelligence. He actually knows how to use water membrane illusion. Gohan smiled as he walked over and patted King Yu's shoulder. Don't worry, he escaped anyway. Your mission is complete. You didn't kill the opponent, so don't worry. Humph. King Yu was unhappy. He fiercely stomped on Gohan's foot and slashed open the iron gate that was locked by the iron lock. Ignoring Gohan behind him, he walked straight into the Wudong Mountain scenic area. He's not very capable, but he has a big temper. Gohan shook his head and picked up an iPhone from the ground. It was sticky and seemed to have been dropped by the slime. Slime knows how to use a phone. Alright, if Gohan knew the actual use of this phone, he would definitely want to chop off his own fingers. Yuan co-name: Goblin Mage, Slime. Level: Tiger. 2D World: Western Magical Beasts. Appearance: Instance Dungeon. All Western Magical Beasts Faction Instance Dungeons. Health: 1 star. Attack: 1 5-star. Agility: 1 star. Demonic Power: 1 star. Ability: wields an elm staff and can use primary and low-level mana. Ultimate Skill: Fireball, Large Fireball. Description: a cannon fodder unit of the Western Magical Beast faction. A powerful unit of the Goblin race. It is also one of the most powerful units. It can learn any of the 6 elements of magic, and after advancing to become a Goblin Great Wizard, it can even use powerful intermediate magic. Legend has it that the Goblin Slime was raised by the 7 Slimes. He joined the nearby Goblin tribe and became the tribe's mage. After coming to the 3-dimensional world, he answered the Dark Dragon King Zayunada's call and joined his army. Although Zayunada looked down on the slime's strength, he still rewarded him with a water intermediate mana scroll, Water Membrane Illusion. Mount Wudong's scenery was famous for its ethereal beauty. As a Taoist holy land during the Ming Dynasty, with the addition of the legend of Zhang Sanfeng, Mount Wudong naturally took over the title of Mount Longhu as the #1 Taoist mountain, becoming the core area of Taoism during the Ming Dynasty. In the entire Ming Dynasty, Mount Wudong had a total of 129 Taoist temples and over 1,000 rooms. Before the apocalypse, Mount Wudong had over 1,000 Taoists and over 10,000 residents. However, with the advent of the apocalypse, the Taoist temples at the foot of Mount Wudong were basically destroyed. Less than 10% of the residents survived. The rest all hid at the top of the mountain. Other than stray cats and dogs, there was not a single living person in the entire Taoist temple on Mount Wudong. The Purple Sky Hall was located at the southeast of Mount Wudong at the foot of the banner spreading peak. It was one of the largest Taoist buildings of Mount Wudong. Before the apocalypse, there were 29 buildings with a construction area of 6,854 square meters. The central axis was a 5-tiered land. From top to bottom, there were the Dragon Tiger Hall, the Steel Pavilion, the Shurfong Hall, the Purple Sky Hall, and the Holy Mother Runes Hall. The two sides were divided into 3 courtyards by the auxiliary buildings, forming a group of halls and buildings. Well, the above text was the description that Gohan found from the Baidu Encyclopedia of the Middle Ages. In fact, other than the dungeon in the game, the Purple Sky Hall of Mount Wudong could no longer be found in the real world. 800 years ago, which was also the time when the dungeon took place, the Purple Sky Hall was completely burned to a pile of rubble by the Dark Dragon King's demonic flames. In fact, after that battle, the entire Mount Wudong was shaved off by 30 meters. The entire mountain had changed completely, and 90% of the buildings no longer existed. However, in the game, the Purple Night Palace still existed perfectly on this piece of land. However, just like the ticketing office, the Purple Night Palace had been completely occupied by Yuan Yen. As the second line of defense, it controlled the entire road. Chapter 64. I'm telling the truth. Glutton, organize your subordinates and stop the pair of sword-bearers. In the Purple Night Hall, a huge ogre with gloves on his hands lay on a bed made up of a few offering tables. He threw live cats that were shrieking miserably into his mouth, as if he was eating multi-taste peanut. He ate them one at a time with great joy. Move to the side. The Arabian head smashed into the head of the goblin mage slime, sending it flying several meters away. If not for the nimbleness of the goblin's small body, it would have been smashed half to death. Ogres are powerful, but goblins are trash. They're not fit to stand with ogres. Yes, the great ogre leader, Glutton. Lowly goblins are not fit to stand with ogres. The slime was beaten up, but he had to praise the ogre leader. The goblin wanted to tell the ogre leader that 2 young humans are coming, and they have soft skin and tender flesh. The ogre leader must not miss them. Humans. Delicious. It's been a long time since I've eaten them. The ogre leader licked his lips. The kittens that were munching on the meat were no longer delicious. He tossed the kitten in his hand into his mouth, and then threw the remaining cat on the table to his 4 subordinate. Ogu. Follow the great glutton. Delicious. Ogu. Ogu. The 4 ogres patted their chests and roared as they followed the Arab head out of the violet firmament hall. They were fantasizing about the beautiful future of feasting on human flesh as they blocked the path to the Purple Night Hall. Have you memorized the important points that I've explained to you? After breaking through the first goblin blockade, Gohan tried his best to explain to King Yu how to use his swordsmanship for the next battle. For the next battle against the ogres, Gohan intended to let King Yu train his swordsmanship. In the next battle, there will be a total of 5 ogres, 4 ogre warriors and 1 ogre boxer. Gohan told King Yu about the instant's dungeon information that he had obtained from the forum. Among them, the ogre warriors use axes that are over a meter long. Because these axes are very heavy, their damage is very high. An ancient sword rank sword Maiden will lose at least 30 points of shield energy after being hit by the axe. Even with your famed sword rank physique, you will probably lose 3 to 5 points of shield energy. This should be enough to break through your defense. However, the axes of the ogre warriors are too big and heavy, so their attack speed is very slow. On average, they can only attack once every 3 seconds. Therefore, when fighting against warriors, what he needed to do was to identify their attack trajectories, make predictions, and dodge their attacks. Then, he could use the 5 fleeting time styles to counterattack. Their bodies are large, and their dodging abilities are poor. With your lousy sword technique, you will be able to hit them, so you don't have to worry about accuracy. As such, the key to fighting is to dodge the attacks of the ogres. Your shield energy can only withstand around 20 attacks. You must kill the 4 ogre warriors before the shield disappears. Do you understand? That's right, the ogres have thick skin and have around 300 HP. You will probably need to attack 10 times to kill one ogre warrior. Then there's the ogre boxer. His attack power is about the same as a warrior's, and he can only deal around 3 to 5 points of damage. However, his attack speed is very fast, and his accuracy is very high. If he joins the fight, I don't think you will be a match for him. As such, I will first restrain the ogre boxer so that he cannot join the fight. You can fight the 4 ogre warriors without worry and train your sword technique. You will restrain the ogre boxer? King Yu looked at Gohan in disbelief. Although your sword technique is indeed very powerful, this king will be fighting the ogre warriors. What will you rely on to deal with the ogre boxer? This. Gohan patted the chinpin sword on his back. I still have her. Are you stupid? You can only use one sword lady to fight at the same time. If this king is fighting, you cannot use the chinpin sword. King Yu asked suspiciously. The reason why we sword wielder can only use one sword lady at the same time is because the sword lady is unable to fight alone. We have to rely on the sword wielder to transfer the sword essence to the sword lady. With the support of the sword essence, the sword lady can fight. However, the sword wielder can only have one sword scar in his body at the same time, so he can only transfer the sword essence to one sword lady. However, if I don't need to transfer the sword essence to the chinpin sword through the sword scar, and only use the chinpin sword itself, it doesn't matter. Gohan explained. This is the strength of a sword master. In a sense, a sword master can fight with 2 sword ladies at the same time. If I can't transfer the sword essence through the sword scar, then what's the difference between the chinpin sword and an ordinary sword? King Yu was furious. A sword lady made of ordinary iron is as easy to break as a tree branch in front of Yuan Ko. If you use the chinpin sword like this, aren't you afraid of breaking her body? That depends on who is using it. Gohan tapped King Yu's head. If it's you, even 1,000 chinpin swords will break, but if it's me, even 1,000 ogre boxers won't be able to break my chinpin sword. I smell it. It's lunch. Standing in the middle of the road, the ogre boxer Big Gulp took a deep breath and licked his fat lip. At the other end of the road, the figures of Gohan and King Yu gradually became clearer. Ao Gu, the 2 of you go and capture those 2 people. Big Connoisseur wants to eat boiled meat slices today. Big Connoisseur ordered 2 of his 4 subordinates. In his view, 2 powerful ogre warriors were enough to deal with these skinny humans. Ao Gu! Ao Gu! The subordinates roared, raised their axes, and charged at Gohan and King Yu. Go, King Yu! Remember what I told you! Gohan whispered in King Yu's ear. King Yu blushed and spat. He raised his chinpin sword and charged at the 4 ogres. Soon, the 2 sides clashed. The ogre at the front saw the tender King Yu and immediately became hungry. He raised his large axe high and swung it down, trying to kill the sword maiden with one blow. Queen Yu was already prepared for the act. She focused on the opponent's movements. When she saw the axe raised high, she immediately dodged to the left. Though her movements were clumsy, she was still nimble. The ogre's axe missed its target. Ha ha! Seeing that he had dodged successfully, the Yu King beamed with joy. He took this opportunity to stab the ogre warrior a few times. System notice. You have dealt damage to ogre warrior, -30. System notice. You have dealt damage to ogre warrior, -30. System notice. You have dealt damage to ogre warrior, -30. With 3 slashes, the ogre warrior's HP dropped by a third. Despicable scum! Do you see this king's exquisite sword art? King Yu proudly waved the King Yu Gojian sword at Gohan. Be careful of your back. Gohan looked at King Yu as though he was looking at an idiot. What? Back? King Yu was stunned. Then, she felt something hit her back. She flew a few meters away and fell heavily to the ground. The second ogre warrior that arrived behind the first ogre warrior swung his axe at the king of you. System notice: you have taken damage. Shield energy loss, -5. At the same time, the first ogre warrior raised his great axe and slashed at the king of you. In the end, King Yu was hit by the second ogre warrior's axe. System notice: you have taken damage. Shield energy loss, -4. Damn it. While the first ogre warrior finished its attack and raised its axe again, King Yu crawled up from the ground. At this moment, the second ogre warrior's attack came. The Yu King's sword tapped on the large axe and used the rebound force to increase the distance between him and the ogre warrior. The ogre warrior's attack missed, and he also left a furious sword mark on the ogre warrior's body. As a result, the king of Yu and the two ogre warriors clashed. From the battle situation, Gu Han's training and teaching of King Yu was very effective. If it was said that King Yu's skills were like that of a 3-year-old in the battle against Steeltooth and the goblins, then he was now around 10 years old. Facing the pincer attack of the two ogre warriors, King Yu was able to dodge them all. Apart from being hit twice at the start, King Yu wasn't attacked by the ogre warriors anymore. On the contrary, King Yu's sword was able to hit the ogre warrior's body every time, and his 5 forms fleeting time was starting to look decent. The Sword Maiden is the Sword Maiden. Though she's forgotten her swordplay, once she starts to practice, her talent in swordplay will become very great. Behind King Yu, Gohan muttered to himself as he watched him fight. Ever since he started to nurture King Yu's swordplay, Gohan understood that the Sword Maiden had great talent in swordplay. However, could a Sword Maiden without talent still be considered a Sword Maiden? Soon, under King Yu's increasingly skilled attacks, the two ogre warriors' HP dropped to half. This made Abbasid, who was watching from the back, extremely vexed. He quickly ordered the remaining 2 ogre warriors to join the fight. Augu! Augu! The 3rd and 4th ogre warriors joined the fight, and King Yu's advantage instantly turned into a disadvantage. Surrounded by 4 ogre warriors, King Yu began to struggle. Dodging was no longer easy. After dodging 3 strikes, he would not be able to dodge the 4th. In a short minute, King Yu had been hit more than 10 times, and his shield lost over 60 points of energy. The situation was extremely dangerous. Chapter 65. A small building on the right side of the Sword Pavilion in Yuzhong City had always been the residence of the Sword Pavilion Master. The Sword Master was responsible for protecting the entire Sword Pavilion and protecting the sleeping Sword Lady from any threats. According to the iron rules of the Sword Committee, the Sword Master was not allowed to leave the Sword Pavilion for more than 3 hours unless there was a crisis that threatened the survival of mankind. They were also not allowed to leave the core area of the base city. Therefore, this position was especially suitable for those powerful sword-bearers who had decided to retire in peace. For example, the current Sword Master, Lu Lei, retired from the world at the age of 80 and took over the position of Sword Master. Since then, he had never appeared in the world again. At this moment, Lu Lei's eyes were closed, and he was lying on the bamboo rattan rocking chair in a deep sleep. However, no one knew that he was currently communicating with someone 1,000 miles away through a hidden communication line. Lu Sanshur, you old man. You're living a leisurely life in retirement, aren't you? Judging from the voice, the person on the other end of the communication should also be an old man. Ha! Old wooden fish, you're living a more comfortable life than I am. How is it? Your precious granddaughter has taken back the Ishian sword. Are you happy now? I risked being expelled from the Sword Committee to remove the seal on the Ishian sword. Shouldn't you make it up to me? Lu Lei laughed. He could tell from his words that the person on the line was none other than Liu Nianling's grandfather, Fleeting Wooden Fish, the former family head of the Liu Nian family. If my Liu Nian family wants something, he wouldn't dare say no to it. Flowing Time Wooden Fish said disdainfully. Since the Liu Nian family is so powerful, I'm curious. Why did you agree to the Sword Committee's stupid suggestion? Your granddaughter has suffered a lot in the hands of Ishian. If it weren't for that stupid kid, she would have lost her life, Lu Lei said sarcastically. I don't believe that Sword Celestial Cloudy Sky, Lu Sanshur, doesn't have a backup plan. If my granddaughter dies in front of you, then you might as well give up on living, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish said indifferently. Alright, old wooden fish, let's not talk about this. This is the first time you've taken the initiative to contact me in 18 years. What's your purpose? Could it be that your precious granddaughter's leisurely immortal sword encountered some unforeseen event or trouble again, and you want me to take responsibility for it? The Ishian sword is a little troublesome, but that's Ling's problem. As the successor of the Liunian clan, what use is she if she can't even subdue a mere Ishian sword? I'm not looking for you for the wandering immortal sword, but for the Qingpin sword. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish spat out the words Qingpin sword. Qingpin sword? I seem to have heard of it somewhere. Let me think. I'm getting old and muddle-headed. I clearly heard this name yesterday. Lu Lei thought for a while and said, I remember now. It's the silly boy who saved your granddaughter. The sword maiden he got from the sword burial grounds is called the Qingpin sword. Yes, that Qingpin sword. On the other end of the call, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish's tone turned strange. Old thing, give me some face and take back the sword of poverty. Take it back. Lu Lei's rocking chair suddenly stopped moving, and his expression turned grim. Did I hear that right, old wooden fish? You're telling me to take back the Qingpin sword? You're right. The Qingpin sword belongs to the Liunian clan. It's something passed down from Patriarch Lu Nian's grandmother. It's only right for the Liunian clan to take it back, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish said firmly. Are you crazy? The sword is already synchronized with that silly boy. If you take back the Qingpin sword, you'll break his sword mark and ruin his entire life. Your granddaughter should have reported this to you by now. His talent in swordsmanship is even greater than yours. He might even become a powerful sword master who can support the human race. How can you ruin such a genius just because you say so? No, even if this Gohan sword doesn't have any talent, as long as he's still human, I will not allow the Liunian clan to break the rules of the human race. Lu Lei grew agitated. He could not understand why the Fleeting Time world, the pillar of humanity, would destroy the future of a wielder with a bright future, all for the sake of an ancient sword. Why would the Fleeting Time world trample on the rules that had kept humanity united for 1,000 years? Lu Lei, I'm begging you. I'm begging you, promise me. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish was silent for a while before he spoke with a heavy tone, enunciating each word clearly. I understand now. Old Wooden Fish, you're afraid of a sword master who's even stronger than the Liunian clan. I know that the Liunian clan's master has always been the strongest sword master in the world. You're afraid that the crown will fall from your heads, aren't you? Nonsense. Which era has there been a sword master whose talent in swordsmanship surpasses the Liunian clan? Are you saying that the Liunian clan is going to cripple all of them? If we're going to cripple them, we might as well just kill them. That way, no one will gossip about the Liunian clan. The only reason the Liunian clan is able to maintain our reputation as the strongest swordmaster is because of our hard work and training. Don't you know that? Then what's the reason? Old Wooden Fish, if you don't give me a reason that I can't refuse, I will not allow this to happen. Lu Lei said firmly. Very well, take a look at this. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish passed a document to Lu Lei. Sword Essence Test Records of the People's Gohan? Lu Lei read out the name of the document. It was a record of Gohan's Sword Essence test from the moment he was born. Do you see it? From 1 to 5 years old, his sword essence increased from 1 quark to 9 quarks. After 5, his sword essence stopped growing. Until 4 days ago, his innate sword essence value was still 9 quarks. But yesterday, in just 3 days, he increased his acquired sword essence value by 101 quark. Don't you think it's very strange? It's a little strange. Lu Lei knocked on the armrest of the rocking chair. But it's not strange. As long as he's willing to spend money to buy sword essence pills, it's not strange to increase his sword essence by 1,000 quarks in a day. No, I'm not talking about how he increased his sword essence by 100 quarks in 3 days. It's very strange. I'm talking about how his sword essence value hasn't increased at all since he was 5 years old. It's very strange. Fleeting Wooden Fish's words were filled with an evil aura, and Lu Lei instantly felt a chill run down his spine. The truth was that in the past 12 years, during the period when the sword essence grew the fastest, the amount of sword essence did not increase by even a single quark. This was indeed very strange. Why is it like this? Lu Lei mumbled to himself. Old thing, you've also reached the status of an immortal sword tier. I think you've heard of that person 700 years ago whose name can't even be spoken. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish's tone began to tremble. He, the head of the world's #1 family, was actually beginning to feel fear. Could it be that this Gohan and that person? The rocking chair under Lu Lei's buttocks could not withstand the surging sword essence around him, and it immediately exploded into a pile of dust. Lu Lei stood on the ground and opened his eyes that had been closed all this time. That person. Lu Lei's expression changed countless times. Finally, he gritted his teeth and made a decision. Old Wooden Fish, it's fine if you don't mention that person. Since you've brought it up, I'll tell you. 700 years ago, we humans let him down. 700 years later, I don't want to let his descendants down. Even if that Gohan destroys the entire world, we owe his family. Lu Lei, admit it. Don't be agitated, Lu Sanshire. I heard the explosion. You're still as hot-tempered as ever. It's been 20 years, and you still haven't toned it down. I've already toned it down a lot, Old Wooden Fish. Otherwise, the entire house would have been blown to smithereens. I admit that we humans owe him. I don't intend to do anything to him or ruin his future. However, I must take back the Chinpin sword. The Chinpin sword can be in anyone's hands, but not his. Let's not talk about the mysteries of the Chinpin sword. Let me ask you, what's the difference between taking back the Chinpin sword and destroying his sword mark and destroying his future? Of course there's a difference. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish laughed. Our family has a few of the green silk severing sword. Lu Lei was momentarily speechless. The severed green silk could perfectly sever the connection between the wielder of any sword below the level of an immortal sword and the sword mistress. If the severed green silk was used on Gohan, not only would it not harm his future, it might even make him stronger. However, the green silk slasher was something that even an immortal sword-tier sword wielder like Lu Lei would throw away his pride and use all of his strength to fight for. Yet, he had actually used it on a mere ancient sword-tier sword wielder. This was an extreme waste of a heavenly treasure, and it was the epitome of extravagance. Old geezer, I'll take your silence as a yes. I'll send someone to retrieve the Chinpin sword in a few days. Wait. Lu Lei pursed his lips. I still can't accept it. At least not in Yuzhong City. You can't bear to part with your pride, are you? Fleeting Time Wooden Fish snorted. Forget it. He'll have to leave the city to complete his quest sooner or later. It'll be more convenient to make a move on him outside the city. Just don't interfere when the time comes. With that, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish hung up the call. Rubbish! A ripple-like sword chi swept up from beneath Lu Lei's feet, sweeping away the debris and dust that were left on the ground after the rocking chair had been smashed. Chapter 66. My eyes aren't enough. King Yu, who was surrounded by 4 ogre warriors, struggled to deal with the attacks of 4 axes. She gradually felt powerless. Her eyes could only see to the left and right. She couldn't deal with the attacks coming from behind. Use your senses. Feel the wind, feel the air, feel the will, trust your body, your sword maiden's instincts will tell you where to hide. Gu-han, who was watching, noticed King Yu's predicament, and commanded loudly from behind her. Use my body to feel? King Yu laughed in anger. Your words are like farting. Although she felt that Gu-han was farting, King Yu closed her eyes and decided to do as Gu-han said. She used her body to feel the enemy's attack. The result was that King Yu ate 4 axes in a row and couldn't dodge even once. Damn it, this king won't believe this despicable liar anymore. King Yu thought angrily and was about to open her eyes. Suddenly, a subconscious thought flashed through her body, telling her to dodge to the left. King Yu's body tilted slightly to the left and brushed past the axe coming from behind. It's really effective. King Yu was a little excited. At this moment, another subconscious thought appeared and told her to bend down. King Yu was indeed a natural sword maiden. His comprehension and quality were extremely high. After being touched by Gu-han, he seemed to have changed into a different person. He no longer dodged in a sorry state. Instead, he flew through the flowers like a butterfly, not touching a single leaf. How enviable! Seeing King Yu quickly comprehend what he had spent a month to comprehend, Gu-han couldn't help but feel envious. However, Gu-han seemed to have forgotten that King Yu was not a newbie with no foundation in the way of the sword. Her sword skills had long been deeply engraved into her soul. It was just that when she awakened, she forgot how to use it. If Gu-han was only slightly jealous, then the ogre boxer on the other side felt that things were getting out of hand. Things weren't going according to his script, and it seemed like his 4 underlings wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Ayo Gu! Let Big Gobbler kill you personally. The ogre boxer Abbasid Khan decided not to put on airs and wait in the back. Instead, he was going to swing his fists and personally take the field. Finally can't hold it in anymore? Gu-han noticed the ogre boxer's movement. The 4 ogres are the best training opponents for King Yu. A mere ogre boxer should stay there. Gu-han grabbed Ching Pin's sword from his back and leapt 5 meters into the air. He then used the cliff beside him to propel himself over King Yu's group and stood in front of the ogre boxer. Because the famed sword lady King Yu's physique was increased by 50% to Gu-han, Gu-han's physique was greatly strengthened. If King Yu was in sword form and held by Gu-han, then 100% of King Yu's physique would be added to Gu-han's body. At that time, jumping 10 meters into the air, and even flying for a short period of time would not be impossible. P.S. The author would like to apologize to everyone. Due to certain reasons, an important setting was left out in the previous chapters. The author would like to add that when the sword lady is in sword form, 50% of her physique will be added to the wielder. When the sword lady is in sword form and held in the wielder's hand, 100% of her physique will be added to the wielder. This is the case in both the real world and the game. This is why Gu-han could use his mortal body to unleash all kinds of sword chi and engage in a melee with the powerful Yuan Ko. In truth, this setting should have been explained in the King of Yu's Go Jian Jian instance, but the author wrote too quickly and forgot. My apologies. Your opponent is me. Gu-han's Ching Pin was pointed at the ogre boxer's Arabian head's nose. Agu. The Arabian head will kill you first, human. The ogre boxer was enraged. His fists, covered in gauntlets of pure metal, smashed at the 4 scars on Gu-han's face. If these blows landed, Gu-han's head would probably be pulverized. Too slow. With the physique of the sword lady, the ogre boxer's movements were too slow in the eyes of an expert swordsman like Gu-han. Gu-han could easily dodge the Arabian head's iron fist. Yuan Ko name, ogre boxer, Arabian head. Rank, phantom. 2-dimensional world. Western magical beasts instance dungeons. All Western magical beasts faction dungeons. HP 2 stars. Attack 2 5 stars. Agility 1 star. Demonic power none. Ability. Heavy gauntlets made of pure metal. Every strike has a force of 800 kilograms and can shatter an opponent's skull with a single strike. Ultimate move: Cannon Iron Fist Charged Strike. Description: The ogres are the core strength of the Western magical beasts. They have more than 30 different types of soldiers, ranging from tiger to dragon. They have a clear hierarchy of power and are a large group of creatures. The ogre boxer is the weakest force of the ogre tribe. The Arabian head was abandoned by his tribe when he was young. Later on, he came to the three-dimensional world and was subdued by the Dark Dragon King as his subordinate. He is extremely loyal to the Dark Dragon King Zayunada. The Arabian head loves human flesh. He once ate an entire village of humans. When there are no humans to eat, he likes to eat kittens and puppies. He is an extremely vicious opponent. The Arabian head is very strong in close combat. Even among the Phantom Yuan Ko, he is one of the top close combat soldiers. However, he is extremely afraid of long-range attacks. With his great mastery of swordsmanship, Gohan could not find it easier to toy with the ogre boxer. Gohan acted like he was toying with a child. No matter how fast the ogre boxer punched, the tip of Ching Pin's sword would always strike the ogre boxer's wrist. In just a few short minutes, the ogre boxer's wrist was already riddled with holes. Ao Gu! Ao Gu! Ao Gu! The Arabian head will definitely kill you, you wretched human. The great connoisseur wants to crush your bones and suck out your marrow. The ogre boxer howled incessantly, but at the same time, he was panting like a tired old bull. Fine, I'll change your opponent. Suddenly, the ogre boxer, who had punched nothing but air no matter how many times he punched, realized that the human who was as nimble as a monkey had suddenly disappeared. Ao Gu! This despicable human must be afraid of the Arabian head's strength and ran away. The ogre boxer did not know if he was truly stupid or just pretending to be so. But since the human had fled, it was time to go and help his subordinates. However, when the ogre boxer looked at the location of the previous battle, he was immediately dumbfounded. Of his 4 subordinates, 3 had disappeared, and the remaining one was lying on the ground. Beside his corpse, a dimensional vortex was forming. A few seconds later, the corpse of the 4th ogre warrior was sucked into the dimensional vortex, leaving no trace. All 4 of them were killed. The Arabian head could not help but feel a chill run down his spine, and he began to think that perhaps he should run for his life. But at this moment, King Yu, who had finished killing the 4 ogre warriors, charged forward and slashed at the Arabian head. Forget it, don't even think about escaping, just kill this little girl. Ao Gu! The Arabian head shouted without any innovation and began to fight with King Yu. Logically speaking, the pressure that King Yu felt from one ogre boxer was even greater than when he had faced 4 ogre warriors. Although the 4 ogre warriors were numerous, their attacks were simple and easy to dodge. King Yu could rely on his instincts to dodge. However, the ogre boxer's weapon was not a clumsy axe, but a light gauntlet. His attacks were fast and precise, on a completely different level from the ogre warriors, Yuan Ko. From the start, King Yu took 2 solid punches and lost more than 50 points of shield energy. This made King Yu feel like he was going to fail miserably. What should I do? Panicking, King Yu actually took the initiative to ask Gohan. If this was the previous King Yu, he would rather die than ask Gohan. He actually took the initiative to ask. Gohan was both surprised and gratified by King Yu's change. Since your body can't dodge, then don't dodge. Use your full strength and attack the opponent's fist. Attack the fist? When King Yu saw the ogre boxer's fist coming at him, he decisively stopped dodging and slashed back with his sword. The ogre boxer had not expected such a response. He was forced back a few steps, and his attack instantly dissipated. Chance. King Yu's swordsmanship instincts were becoming more and more obvious. At this moment, she immediately found an opportunity to attack. 5 forms fleeting time surged towards the ogre boxer like a tidal wave. A few minutes later, the ogre boxer's body heavily fell backwards. A dimensional vortex appeared and sucked his corpse back into the two-dimensional world. Congratulations, you've recovered at least 20% of your previous swordsmanship strength. You can barely handle the upcoming battle. Do your best. Gohan took out a towel from somewhere and handed it to King Yu to wipe the sweat off her face. Thank you. King Yu hesitated for a moment before taking the towel and wiping the sweat off her face. A man's scent entered King Yu's nose. Damn it, this despicable human actually dares to give this towel that he used before to this king. This king is confiscating this towel. After wiping the sweat off her face, King Yu stuffed the towel into her sword sheath. I forgot to mention that the sword sheath can also store some personal belongings of the sword lady. It should not be too big. As you wish. Gohan nodded and did not take the towel to heart. He also did not notice the blush on King Yu's face. Chapter 67. Elder, are we really going to charge in? In a dense forest, a group of Taoist priests dressed in black and white Taoist robes were lying in ambush. Among them, a young Taoist priest who looked like he had just reached adulthood asked an old Taoist priest next to him in a trembling voice. The thin layer of hair on the young Taoist priest's lips could not help but tremble along with his lips. This young Taoist priest was one of the Taoist priests in the Skyward Palace on Mount Wudong's Tianzhu Peak. The survivors on Mount Wudong's Tianzhu Peak had formed a unique social system of their own over the past 200 years. First of all, because the land around Tianzhu Peak and the mountainside was not much arable land, and the yield was very low, the population had to be maintained at less than 1,000 people. Relying on strict birth control, the population of Tianzhu Peak had not exceeded 800 people in the past 200 years. Secondly, it was necessary to ensure that Tianzhu Peak had its own fighting power. These survivors would select strong males from the babies they gave birth and send them to the Skyward Palace from a young age to be trained by the Taoist priests who knew ancient martial arts. They would be trained in martial arts and sword techniques from a young age. When they reached adulthood, their attainments in martial arts were not to be underestimated. However, because they were completely free from work to practice martial arts, the number of Taoist priests in the Skyward Palace was also strictly controlled to less than 30 people. These Taoist priests were equivalent to the Tianzhu Peak's army. Once the number exceeded 30, the remaining labor force could no longer support this batch of Taoist priests who did not produce. Of course, with just this army of 30 Taoist priests, there was no way they could resist the waves of attacks from Yuan Ko. Their greatest trump card was the Wu-Tang sect leader, who had successfully synchronized with the True Force sword. It was also under the full protection of the Wu-Tang sect leader that Mount Wudong's Tianzhu Peak had lived through 200 years of relative peace. However, this good fortune had ended a few days ago. The powerful Dark Dragon King Zayunada had set his eyes on Mount Wudong. The Wu-Tang sect leader resisted with all his might, but he was defeated and killed in the end. With the death of the Wu-Tang sect leader, there was no longer a sword wielder who could synchronize with the True Force sword in all of Mount Wudong. To be more precise, there was not a single sword wielder on Mount Wudong. There was no way they could resist the Dark Dragon King who had recovered from his injuries and made a comeback. After a discussion among the Taoist priests, they decided to risk their lives and break through the blockade set up by the Dark Dragon King, leading the remaining humans to find a safe shelter. Then, we saw the scene we were witnessing now. More than 20 Taoist priests were hiding in the bushes, waiting for the right time to break through the blockade line. Behind this group of Taoist priests, the remaining 700 survivors all carried their belongings and weapons. Once the Taoist priests broke through the blockade, they would follow behind and kill together. Yuan Kong, put away your cowardice. The old Taoist reprimanded the young Taoist named Yuan Kong mercilessly. We have no other way out. Other than fighting with all our might, there is no other way. Immeasurable Heavenly Lord. Immeasurable Heavenly Sovereign. Immeasurable heavenly sovereign. The rest of the Taoist priests, who were lying in ambush, chanted in unison. None of them had any fear in their hearts. Behind them were their parents, wives, and children. In order for them to live, these Taoist priests had already disregarded life and death. Immeasurable heavenly sovereign. Yuan Kong chanted along. It felt as though he had gained some courage, and his legs were no longer as weak as before. Elder, look. The skeleton mage has left the sentry post. Yuan Kong was still young, so he was the last to notice that the skeleton mage, who had been standing at the sentry post and monitoring the surroundings, had suddenly left the sentry post. He had no idea where it had gone. Yuan Zhen, Yuan Gu, you've been waiting here for 2 days. Are you sure that the skeleton mage won't appear in the next half an hour? The elder asked the other 2 Taoist priests. Elder, the 2 of us swear to Emperor Jinwu that every time the skeleton mage leaves the sentry post, the 2 of us will purposely go to the blockade line to cause trouble. We've killed many skeletons, but the skeleton mage will only return after 30 minutes. The fat and thin Taoist priest said. Immeasurable heavenly sovereign. The elder slammed his fist on the ground. This is our best chance. I heard from the sect leader that these skeleton mages need to spend half an hour every day to replenish their energy. This is our best chance. Without the skeleton mage's fireball spell, we'll have a fighting chance. I'll count to 5. Everyone, follow me and charge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kill. The elder took the lead and stood up from the bushes. He was the first to charge out. His vigor was fierce, and his courage was majestic. It could be said that he was not afraid of death. Under the lead of this courageous elder, the remaining 20 or so Taoist priests rushed out. They raised the swords in their hands and followed behind the elder, charging out. The skeleton warrior at the entrance became the Wudong elder's first target. The long sword in his hand ruthlessly slashed at the skeleton warrior's shoulder. The skeleton warrior's green soul flame flashed in the skeleton warrior's eye socket. It raised its iron bone longsword and was about to counterattack. But unexpectedly, a dozen swords slashed at the unlucky skeleton warrior's body at the same time. The green soul flame was instantly extinguished, and the skeleton warrior fell apart into a pile of bones. Following the skeleton warrior's fate, the rest of the skeleton warriors guarding the entrance could not withstand the attacks of the 20 Taoist priests. One by one, their soul flames were extinguished, and they turned into a pile of broken bones. The Wudong Taoist priests did not lose a single person. They had successfully occupied the blockade and the entrance. Their first battle was a success. Everyone, listen to me. There are at least 80 skeletal warriors and 2 or 3 skeletal mages in the campsite. Once you've entered the campsite, split into teams of 7 and form the true martial 7-section formation to clear out all the skeletal warriors in the campsite. Yes. The true martial 7 sections formation was a formation created by the founder of Wudong Mountain, Zhang Sanfeng and Zhang Junbao, according to the tortoise and snake generals of the great Emperor Jinwu. The true martial 7 sections formation relied on 7 sets of martial arts, each with its own subtleties. It could be used in a one-on-one fight, but it could also be used as a team to kill the enemy. But if 2 people worked together, they could complement each other. They could attack and defend at the same time, and the power would be greatly increased. If 3 people worked together, it would be twice as powerful as 2 people working together. 4 people were equivalent to 8 masters, 5 people were equivalent to 16 masters, and 6 people were equivalent to 32 masters. When 7 people worked together, it would be like 64 masters attacking at the same time. These Taoist priests had been following the instructions of their elders since they were young. The 7 of them practiced swordsmanship at the same time, and they would be taught the martial arts of the true martial 7 sections formation. They had reached the point where their hearts and minds were connected. At the elder's command, the remaining 28 people found their own brothers and sisters. They immediately formed 4 sets of the true martial 7 sections formation and charged into the enemy's camp. Seeing that his disciples had killed their way in, the elder stood at the door and sighed. Those skeletons far outnumber my disciples, and all of their bones are hard. If I don't slash at least 10 to 20 times, it's impossible to kill a single skeleton. Once we're surrounded by the skeletons, I don't know how many of my poor disciples can survive, even with the true martial 7 sections formation. Turbid tears flowed down from the elder's eyes. Fine, fine. I only hope that the disciples' sacrifice can exchange for the safety of our loved ones. The elder wept secretly at the door. He waited for a few minutes, but he did not hear any battle cries from the camp. He was puzzled. He raised his head and saw Yuan Kong rushing back alone. Oh no! Oh no! The elder slapped his thigh in pain. It seems that Yuan Kong's formation has been broken. Only Yuan Kong, the coward, escaped. When Yuan Kong waved his hand and ran to the elder's side, the elder slapped Yuan Kong across the face. Vile spawn, you actually had the nerve to abandon your fellow brothers and run back here alone. Elder. Yuan Kong didn't run back. Yuan Kong covered his face, feeling extremely wronged. My brothers told me to come back and report that there's not a single skeleton in the camp. You bastard! Running away is running away. How dare you lie? The elder was so angry that he wanted to slap Yuan Kong again. Yuan Kong dodged nimbly. It's true, elder. If you don't believe me, follow me inside and take a look. I've searched the entire camp, and I can't find a single skeleton. Seeing Yuan Kong's wronged expression, the elder believed him a little more. Yuan Kong, is what you said true? It's true, it's absolutely true. Yuan Kong turned around to look, and immediately said joyfully, Elder, look, aren't the senior brothers all back? The elder looked into the distance, and saw that all his disciples had returned to the entrance of the camp. He opened his eyes and counted. There were exactly 28 of them. That's strange. Where did all the skeletons go? The Wu-Tang elder was puzzled. He looked at his disciples and saw that they were all at a loss and did not know what to do. Forget it. Let's just treat it as a blessing from the Zhenwu Great Emperor. Let's destroy these damn skeletons. The elder waved his hand and made a decision. Disciples, call our families and friends from the back. Let's leave this place and go hide. Yes. The Taoist priests received the order and immediately walked to the back. On the other side, the survivors who were observing the battle also realized that the blockade had been broken through. They all ran out of their hiding places and wanted to meet up with the Taoist priests. Wait. Just at this time, a certain someone shouted loudly, giving everyone a fright. Could it be that a sentient Yuan Shun had appeared? Who is it? The Taoist priests immediately reorganized into 4 sets of the Zhenwu 7-section formation and surrounded the elder in the center. They looked around vigilantly. I helped you get rid of these skeletons. Is this how you treat your benefactor? As soon as the voice fell, Guhan jumped down from a tree. The Yu King followed closely behind and jumped down as well. The elder took a closer look. This man looked extremely ferocious. There were 4 ugly scars on his face. However, from his figure and posture, he should be human. Behind this human was a valiant and extraordinary beautiful woman who held a long sword in her hand. Looking at these 2 people, the elder could not help but recall the 2 figures in his memory, a man and a woman, who had protected Wudong's sect together. You are. The elder gestured for the Taoist priests to put away their weapons to show a friendly attitude. I am the military governor, an ancient sword wielder. Guhan smiled and introduced himself. The one beside me is my sword lady, the Yu King Gojian. Sword lady. The elder let out a long sigh of relief and immediately relaxed. The heavens have mercy. Wu-Tang Mountain is saved. Chapter 68. 2 benefactors, please accept this old man's bow. After the Wu-Tang elder calmed down a little, he immediately knelt down on one knee and kowtowed to Gohan. "Two benefactors, please accept this bow." Seeing their own elder kneel, the other 28 brothers and sisters knelt down in unison and thanked Gohan and King Yu. You can't. Gohan hurriedly helped the elder up. Although these people were just NPCs, kneeling for Gohan for 3 days and 3 nights was nothing to Gohan. However, considering that he would need the cooperation of these NPCs in the future, Gohan still pretended to be moved and helped the elder up. No problem. It's what I should do." The elder stood up and said with a face full of emotion, "If it wasn't for the two of you suddenly appearing and clearing out this skeleton camp, I'm afraid that my disciples would have suffered heavy casualties." "It's nothing." Gohan waved his hand. "It's my honor to be able to help you all." Gohan and the elder exchanged a few pleasantries. At this time, the 700-plus survivors came out of various places with bags of all sizes and gradually gathered near the camp's entrance. "Senior, what are you all doing?" Gohan looked at the fleeing crowd and pretended to be surprised as he asked. Of course, he knew that these survivors wanted to leave Wu-Tang Mountain to escape. The strategy guide had already written it clearly. However, the plot required it, so he pretended not to know and asked. "Sai, you two benefactors may not know, but we are all preparing to leave this place and escape." The elder said dejectedly. "Leave this place." When Gohan heard this, he immediately waved his hands and shook his head vigorously. No. You must not leave the peak of Wu-Tang Mountain." What a joke. Of course, Gohan could not let these people leave the peak of Wu-Tang Mountain. Otherwise, if they all died when they went down the mountain, his dungeon would fail. Why is that? The elder did not understand. "Senior, you might not know this, but there are a total of 17 blockades at the foot of the mountain. Even with my abilities, I had to use all my strength to break through these 17 blockades. However, I'm afraid that my actions have already alerted the enemy. I'm afraid that there are more Yuan-Kos gathered at the foot of the mountain than when I ascended the mountain. No matter what, it's impossible for you people to rush over." Gohan made up a story. This was the standard advice in the forum. As long as they said this, the people of Wudong Mountain would give up the idea of going down the mountain. Sure enough, the elder couldn't catch his breath and almost fainted. After regaining consciousness, he stomped his feet forcefully and helplessly ordered his subordinates, "You guys, quickly tell this news to our relatives. Tell them not to go down the mountain to die." Yes, the Taoist priests also looked as if their mothers had died. They went back to persuade their relatives to turn back. Suddenly, the entire mountaintop was filled with the sound of crying. Pessimism and despair shrouded the entire mountaintop. "Two benefactors, it's very windy here. If you don't mind, please follow this old man to Skyward Palace for a cup of tea." The elder forced a smile on his face and extended an invitation to Gohan and King Yu. These two powerhouses who had appeared out of nowhere were the elder's last hope. Of course. Gohan smiled. Everything was going according to plan. Two benefactors, this old man's Taoist name is Refinement. I am the 32nd generation disciple of the Wudong sect. I am currently the acting sect leader of the Wudong sect. The elder, who was the old Taoist priest of refinement, introduced himself after sitting down with Gohan and King Yu in Skyward Palace. I am the military governor, an ancient sword wielder of the Yanjing Bay City. This is my sword lady, the ancient sword lady, King Yu Gojianjian. During the time when the storyline of the dungeon took place, the Yuzhong base city had yet to be built. At that time, only the 3 base cities established by the fleeting calendar existed. In the Huaxia region, there was only one base city, Yanjing. Therefore, all the players in the dungeon claimed that they were from Yanjing Bay City. In fact, after entering the dungeon, the system would set the players' identities as belonging to Yanjing. Gohan also had a communication device that could connect to Yanjing. Therefore, the identity of the military governor was indeed from Yanjing. Interestingly, some of the strange players would deliberately say that they were from other base cities. To them, it did not matter. After all, the old man of refinement had spent his entire life on the top of Mount Wudong. How could he know the current situation of the human world? He had to believe whatever you said. However, the strange thing was that after these players completed the dungeon, they found that no matter how perfect the other steps were, they could not get an SSS rating. For some reason, 5 or 6 survivors would die inexplicably. No matter how skilled the players were, no matter how closely they watched, they could not stop them from walking toward death. As time passed, no one dared to make any trouble on this point. Almsgiver military governor, almsgiver you. Forgive me for being curious, but why did you suddenly appear on the top of Mount Wudong and risk your lives to break through the 18 blockade lines? My Wutang Mountain has not sent anyone down the mountain for 20 years. In this world, there should not be many people who know of my Wutang lineage. After the old Taoist poured a cup of water for the two of them, he asked the question in his heart. Master of refinement, you may not know this, but 100 years ago, a disciple of your sect fought side by side with a swordsman from Yanjing. Unfortunately, your disciple died in battle, and the swordsman escaped and reported the news of Mount Wudong to Yanjing and recorded it. Therefore, Yanjing actually knows that there are human survivors and a small number of swordsmen living on the top of Mount Wudong. Gohan answered one by one according to the standard answers on the guide. If the script was correct, then the Master of Refinement was going to test him. Yes, 100 years ago, our sect's Supreme One spiritual master went down the mountain to travel in troubled times to find a future for Wudong. Unfortunately, Senior Supreme One never returned. Who would have thought that he would die in the hands of Yuan Ko, the boundless heavenly lord? The Master of Refinement recited a salute, as if lamenting his senior's misfortune. P.S. A Taoist saying boundless heavenly lord is similar to a monk saying Amitabha and a Christian saying oh my God. The sect master of minute subtlety might have been too busy and remembered wrongly. Why is it that the Taoist name of your sect's disciple in the records of Yanjing City is enlightened Tao? Gu Han smiled and exposed the probing of minute subtlety. In real history, the story of the Wudong spiritual master Tyre was true. Records of the Taoist master Tyre could still be found in Yanjing's database. However, no player had ever been interested in looking up such information. As a result, when the game had just started and the Wudong Peak Dungeon was released for the first year, countless players had fallen for the problem of the Taoist Master Tyre, which made the Master of Refinement suspicious. Due to the player's ability as a swordsman, the Master of Refinement did not expose the player on the spot. Instead, he nodded in agreement. In secret, he told the disciples to be careful of the player, monitor the player, and not trust the player. This way, the player could not command the disciples of the Wudong Mountain at all. This led to a large number of casualties among the disciples who did not listen to the command, and it was difficult for the mission evaluation to reach above S rank. It was only later that a librarian working in Yanjing's database coincidentally saw the information of the Wudong sect and solved the game's trap. By the way, this librarian later became an Emperor Sword-level swordsman. In Huaxia, librarians had always been a legend. I was thinking too much. Please don't blame me, sir. Please don't blame me. The old Taoist at the refinement realm blushed. His trick had been seen through, and it was really embarrassing. However, the Master of Refinement was relieved. It seemed that the human in front of him was indeed a swordsman in Yanjing. Although the Wudong sect had not been in contact with the outside world for 20 years, through some occasional communication, they had a general understanding of the situation in the outside world. They knew that humans had basically lost 98% of the Earth's land, leaving only 3 base cities in human hand. Master of Refinement is doing this for the safety of the entire Wudong sect. I, military governor, can naturally understand these precautions. Originally, we did not want to disturb the peace of your sect, but 3 days ago, I was 100 miles away when I suddenly saw the top of the Wudong mountain in flames, raging sword chi, and flashes of lightning. It was like the end of the world. Thinking that there were still humans in the Wudong mountain, I was worried about the safety of the Wudong mountain. That's why I killed my way here, wanting to see what happened on the Wudong mountain. So, almsgiver military governor also saw the battle that day. The old Taoist priest in the refinement realm wore a gloomy expression as he said, "To tell you the truth, it was sect leader Ji Jing of our sect who was fighting the Dark Dragon King that day. However, sect leader is already very old, and her chi and blood are all dried up. After forcing the Dark Dragon King back, she spat out a mouthful of blood and passed away yesterday after falling unconscious for 2 days." Master Ji Jing. The celestial master Ji Jing, who coordinated with Lady Jinwu. Guhan put on a shocked expression. If the records in Yanjing City are not wrong, celestial master Ji Jing is already more than 180 years old today. I didn't expect celestial master Ji Jing to live until now. We in Yanjing City thought that celestial master Ji Jing had passed away long ago. In the history of the swordsman for more than 1,000 years, celestial master Ji Jing of the Wudong sect was also a famous existence. It was not because he was famous as a celestial sword-level swordsman, but because he lived for 180 years. Among the swordsmen of the past, Ji Jing's lifespan could be ranked second. If he hadn't died in battle, celestial master Ji Jing might have been able to reach the first place on the longevity list. It was also because celestial master Ji Jing, a celestial sword-level swordsman, lived long enough that Wudong Mountain could break away from the base city and exist for 200 years. When celestial master Ji Jing died, the survivors on the peak of Wudong Mountain suddenly lost their strong protection. That was why they wanted to leave Wudong Mountain and join the embrace of the base city. One had to know that when they first learned of the existence of Wudong Mountain, Yanjing City had once sent a spirit sword-level swordsman to invite Wudong Mountain to join Yanjing City. In the end, he was rejected by celestial master Ji Jing. He couldn't bear to leave his ancestral land where he had lived for more than 100 years. Chapter 69. After more than an hour of tea and chatting, Guhan had established a certain level of trust with the old Taoist priest. At the very least, the old Taoist priest firmly believed that Guhan was a sword-bearer from Swallow Capital City and had the ability to rescue the commoners of Mount Wudong from the clutches of the Dark Dragon King, Zayunada. Guhan had also taken the opportunity to understand the entire Mount Wudong's combat strength in detail from the old Taoist priest. Firstly, there were sword-bearers. Unfortunately, apart from Guhan, the outsider, there were no other sword-bearers in the entire Mount Wudong. In the past 200 years of history, apart from sect master Changsho, heavenly master Zhijing, who was an immortal sword-bearer, Mount Wudong had produced many other sword-bearers. For example, the great second spiritual master, who was recorded in Swallow Capital City's information. This sword-bearer was the second strongest sword-bearer that Mount Wudong had produced and had the strength of a famed sword. Apart from that, Mount Wudong had produced 12 treasured sword-bearers and 41 ancient sword-bearers. When Mount Wudong was at its peak, there were more than double digits of sword-bearers at the same time. However, this was all in the past. Ever since the large-scale dimensional rifts had stopped, the difficulty of producing sword-bearers had risen sharply. In the past 20 years, not a single sword-bearer had appeared. Thus, Mount Wudong had fallen to the extent that only Heavenly Master Zhijing was left. Now that Heavenly Master Zhijing had died in the hands of the Dark Dragon King, there were no other sword-bearers in Mount Wudong. Next was the Sword Lady. Although there were no sword-bearers in Mount Wudong, there were many sword ladies. According to the statistics on the forum, there were more than 100 natural sword ladies in Mount Wudong's arsenal. After all, the Wudong sect was a major martial arts sect second only to the Shaolin Monastery. Furthermore, the Wudong sect was an out-and-out sword sect. 9 out of 10 experts in the sect practiced the sword. In the 600 years of history before the apocalypse, there were countless martial arts experts. The treasured swords that they had worn in front of them were all left behind in the arsenal. Before the Great Calamity, the Wudong sect's armory had collected over 1,000 treasured swords with historical origins. Among these 1,000 swords, a tenth of them had awakened the potential of a sword lady. There was the true martial sword passed down by Zhang Sanfeng, the legendary sword of great Emperor Jin Wu. There was also the silver hook sword used by Zhang Chuishan, an ancient sword. In short, as the leader of the martial arts world, the Wu-Tang sect did not lack sword ladies. Previously, the Taoist commandos organized by the Wudong sect were all wielding natural sword ladies that were not synchronized with each other. This was also the reason why these Taoists could hurt Yuan Ko even though they were not sword bearers. As long as they injected sword essence into the natural sword ladies, even if they could not awaken their human form, they could still hurt Yuan Ko's body hidden in the dimensional gap. These Taoists, who were not sword bearers, should not be underestimated. They were all proficient in swordsmanship and had strong sword essence in their bodies. Holding the real bodies of unawakened sword ladies, they could be considered half-sword masters. With the addition of the true martial 7 sections formation, ordinary rat and tiger level Yuan Ko was no match for them. This is all I can do. The most important thing now is to fix my communication device and contact Yanjing City. Guhan drank the tea in his cup. He had just told the Refinement Realm Old Taoist that he could contact Yanjing City and have them send divine sword-level sword bearers to Mount Wudong to fight against the Dark Dragon King who was about to recover. Therefore, he had to find the components that could fix his communication device. The Refinement Realm Old Taoist immediately racked his brain when he heard that there was a way out. He recalled for a long time before he said with certainty, "It seems that there is a set of broadcasting equipment from before the Great Apocalypse in the Golden Palace on the Tianzhu Peak. Maybe some of the components can still be used." This matched the mission. Gu Han immediately requested, "There's no time to lose. Sect Leader Rue, please send someone to bring me to the Golden Palace Hall and see if my communication device can be repaired." The old Taoist in the refinement realm didn't dare to be negligent. He immediately called for a short Taoist boy to guide him through the cold. This Taoist boy was none other than Yuan Kong, who was trembling in fear before the attack. In the face of the terrifying Yuan Yen, Yuan Kong trembled violently. However, in the face of the Golden Palace that he played with every day, Yuan Kong was very lively. Along the way, he kept introducing the beautiful scenery around him to Gu Han. He also kept asking Gu Han all kinds of strange questions. "Benefactor Military Governor, are there any survivors in the outside world? Benefactor Military Governor, are there many sword-bearers in the outside world? Are there many sword-bearers as powerful as Grandmaster Zhijing? Will they come to save us? Benefactor Military Governor, Yuan Kong heard that there's a sea on the other side of the earth. It's made up of a lot of water. Is that sea as big as our Wudong Mountain? Benefactor Military Governor, why can some people become sword-bearers but Yuan Kong can't? Yuan Kong also wants to become a sword-bearer so that he can protect everyone from harm." Guhan patiently answered Yuan Kong's questions. Yuan Kong was no ordinary NPC. Guhan would be very useful in the upcoming battle. The Wudong Mountain Golden Palace was located at the highest point of the Golden Peak. It was also known as the Taiwa Taiha Palace, which meant that the world was at peace. The Taiwa Taiha Palace and the Forbidden City's Celestial Worship Hall were built in the same style. They symbolized the eternal stability of the world. In the medieval era, Emperor Zhu Di of the Ming dynasty built this palace to show that his monarch's authority was bestowed by God and that he had an inviolable supreme status. During the famous era and the later Celestial Dynasty, the Taiwa Taiha Palace was a very famous tourist attraction. Unfortunately, following the destruction of the world and the invasion of Yuan-Ko, the Golden Palace had been abandoned for a long time. If it were not for the Taoist priests of the Wudong sect stopping them, the Golden Palace might have been torn down by the survivors who lacked firewood to keep themselves warm. However, Yuan Kong was very familiar with the Golden Palace because it was the place where he played since he was young. Under Yuan Kong's guidance, Gohan soon found the dilapidated broadcasting device behind the statue of the great Emperor Jinwu in the Golden Palace. The shell of the broadcasting device was badly damaged and had accumulated a lot of dust. When he pressed it with his finger, he could leave a mark that was a few centimeters deep. It was obvious that the broadcasting device had not been touched for countless years. What Gohan needed to do was to disassemble the device, find 5 intact parts, and replace them with his own communication device. During the initial stage of the game, countless players were stuck at this stage. They did not know how to repair their communication devices. As a result, they could not progress in the dungeon and could only give up and quit the dungeon. It was only after some technical geeks had cleared the dungeon and released a detailed repair guide that the majority of players managed to repair their communication devices according to the guide. Of course, there were some players who were really stupid and could not repair their communication devices no matter how hard they tried. In the end, they could only give up on the dungeon. Replacing 5 spare parts was a small matter. Of course, it was not a problem for Gohan. However, there was too much dust when he disassembled the broadcast equipment. It was like a smoke grenade released by a destroyer, and it made him very uncomfortable. Next to the broadcasting equipment, there was a set of electrical tools. With the help of this set of electrical tools, Gohan easily removed the 5 parts he needed and replaced them with the communication equipment. His movements were so skillful that Yuan Kong was dumbfounded. System notification. Quest 1 completed. You have repaired the communication device. System notification. Main quest has been updated. Task 2. Get in touch. Find a communication band between 57.8 and 120. 5 that belongs to the Yanjin Bay City. Restore communication with the Yanjin Bay City and report the situation on the Wutang Mountain to the Yanjin Bay City. In order to prevent Yuan Ko from eavesdropping on the communication between the base city and the sword bearers, the communication band of the base city would change once a day. Even in the dungeon, the band would constantly change. Every time a player entered a dungeon, the system would give them a new band for them to adjust their communication. It was said that this setting was to allow the players to quickly familiarize themselves with the use of various devices in the real world through the in-game experience. According to statistics, thousands of sword bearers had died under Yuan Ko's siege due to poor communication and their inability to repair their communication devices. This was similar to the 90s. Not only did the driving test include Subject 1, Subject 2, and Subject 3, but there was also a car repair test. In that era, it was very normal for a car to break down after a few hundred kilometers. As a driver, if they didn't know some basic repair skills, they basically didn't need to drive anymore. Otherwise, if the car broke down on the side of the road, there would be no tow truck to save them. Back then, Uncle Lei Feng had died when he was repairing a car. Back to the main topic, after Gohan's constant debugging, he successfully found the communication frequency of Yanjing City on the 87.9 frequency and successfully restored communication with Yanjing City. Hello, this is Yanjing Bay City's communication center. Please report your name and level. The communication was very bad, and there was constant static noise. I am an ancient sword bearer, military governor. I am currently at the peak of Wudong Mountain. There are more than 700 ordinary survivors here. They are facing a massacre by the Dark Dragon King Yuan Ko. I hope that the base city can immediately send people to save them. What? The Dark Dragon King Yuan Ko? Comrade Military Governor, please wait for a moment. I will immediately transfer the call to the Sword Committee office. After a series of beeps, a mature and steady male voice took over the communication. Hello, I am the Sword Committee Office Director. Please explain the information in detail. Therefore, Gohan repeated the situation on Wudong Mountain. After Gohan finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I am sorry, Comrade Military Governor. The immortal sword bearers have important matters to attend to. I am afraid they will not be able to reach Wudong Mountain in a short period of time. Please evacuate from Wudong Mountain immediately. We are powerless. Chapter 70. System Notification. Mission 2 completed. You have found the communication band belonging to Yanjing Bay City. You have restored communication with Yanjing Bay City and reported the situation on Wutang Mountain to Yanjing Bay City. System Notification. Main mission updated. Mission 3. Convince Bay City. Yanjing Bay City is not willing to send out powerhouses to face the Dark Dragon King, as this could lead to huge losses, resulting in the deaths and injuries of deity-level sword bearers. Please think of a way to convince the office director of Yanjing Bay City to use his authority to invite deity-level sword bearers to take action within 5 minutes. No one knew how the deity-level sword bearers who entered Wutang Peak managed to convince Yanjing Bay City to take action. In any case, the players had come up with all sorts of ways to convince Yanjing Bay City. Humanitarianism, humanity helping each other, interdependence, my grandfather being a fleeting old man, all sorts of excuses, but none of them were very effective. Every answer seemed to have a chance of success, but the success rate of every answer was ridiculously low. All of a sudden, posts on the forum about how to persuade Yanjing City to the greatest extent possible were in an uproar. All kinds of masters spoke their minds freely, debating endlessly. Until a master who was said to be a member of the council made a post, instantly putting an end to this debate. Because this counselor only used one sentence to convince Yanjing Bay City to immediately invite deity-level sword bearers without hesitation. Director, there is a situation that I must report to the base. Please make a decision after listening to this information, Gohan said through the comms. What information? The director was getting impatient. Why did these sword bearers always want the honorable deity-level sword bearers to take action? What kind of nonsense was this? At the peak of Wutang Mountain, there are at least 100 sword maidens. Gohan said calmly. What? What did you say? On the other end of the comms, there was the crisp sound of a cup falling to the ground. Say that again? What did you say? I said that there are at least 100 sword maidens here who have not awakened and are still in deep sleep. Gohan paused for a moment before explaining. This is the peak of Mount Wudong, the ancestral land of the Wudong sect. Before the Great Calamity, the Wudong sect was a leading figure in the martial arts world that was founded on the way of the sword. The other end of the line was silent for a few minutes. Your name is Military Governor, right? Comrade Military Governor, do you dare to use your name as the Sword Lady to guarantee to the people of Yanjing that everything you said is true? I guarantee that every word that I, the Military Governor, have said is true. All right, I'll report the situation to the chairman now. If there are no accidents, reinforcements will arrive in 5 hours. Within these 5 hours, you must ensure the safety of the peak of Mount Wudong, especially those sword ladies. Not a single one can be left behind. Understood. With a snap, the other side hung up the call. He was probably in a hurry to find the chairman. System Notification. Mission 3 completed. You have convinced Beijing City to send out reinforcements. System Notification. Main quest has been updated. Mission 4. Preparation. The reinforcements from Yanjing Headquarter City will take at least 3 hours to arrive. However, according to reliable intelligence, the Dark Dragon King, Zayunada, has already discovered that 3 of the blockade lines have been destroyed. He will send his forces one after another in an hour to launch an attack on the peak of Mount Wudong. Please prepare your defenses within an hour. With the completion of Mission 3, the first half of the Wudong Summit Dungeon was declared complete. The second half of the dungeon, protecting the peak of Mount Wudong, became the most important task. Although the system only said that the Dark Dragon King Zayunada would send out reinforcements, it did not specify in detail how powerful the reinforcements would be. In fact, according to the records in the guideposts on the forums, there would be a total of 10 waves of attack. Under these 10 waves of attack, if no more than 3 NPCs died, the dungeon would receive an SSS rating. If no more than 10 NPCs died, the dungeon would receive an SS rating. 20 would receive an S rating. The number of deaths would be limited to 3. Such conditions were extremely difficult for any ancient sword wielder. However, for a sword master like Gohan, who had unparalleled swordplay, and a famed sword maiden like King Yu, who shamelessly played around in ancient sword dungeons, it was extremely easy. As long as the 2 of them blocked all the attacks, it would be fine. However, the rewards of the Wudong's Apex dungeon were about the same as other ancient sword tier dungeons. However, the time it took to complete the Wudong's Apex dungeon was the longest out of all the ancient sword tier dungeons. These 7 hours were more than enough for Gohan to clear another ancient sword dungeon with the same rewards twice. In terms of efficiency, Gohan estimated that he would not be interested in clearing the Wudong Summit dungeon in the future. As such, Gohan decided to properly experience the contents of this dungeon and complete it according to the guide. That way, he would not have any regrets in the future. Within an hour, Gohan needed to make a lot of preparations. Among them, the most important was to create a few sword wielder NPCs on the spot. Yes, you read that right, creating sword wielder NPCs on the spot. In actuality, it was not that there were no NPCs at the peak of Wudong Mountain who had the potential to become a sword wielder. However, due to various reasons, they had not come into contact with a suitable sword maiden. Ever since the first player had accidentally created a sword wielder NPC, there had been players entering this dungeon to experiment with NPC pairings. After spending more than 10 years in testing almost all of the NPCs and sword maidens, they had found a total of 3 NPCs that had been successfully paired with a sword maiden. These 3 NPC sword wielder were of great help to the players. Before this was discovered, the success rate of achieving an SSS rating for the entire Wudong Summit dungeon was only 0.002%. However, with the help of the 3 NPC sword wielder NPCs, the success rate had risen to 0.5%. Among the 3 NPCs, the easiest one to find was the young Taoist priest in the Wudong Temple, Yuan Kong, who had led Gohan to the Golden Temple to find the broadcasting equipment. When Gohan pulled Yuan Kong's hand to the old Taoist priest in the refinement realm and said that he could make Yuan Kong a sword wielder, the 2 NPCs widened their eyes in disbelief. In the words of the old Taoist priest in the refinement realm, the 28 Taoist priests in the Wudong sect had all tested with a total of more than 1,000 swords, and none of them had succeeded. It was said that there were only about 100 sword maidens in the Wudong Mountain. However, due to the lack of information, the people of the Wudong Mountain did not know that not all swords could awaken a sword maiden. They thought that all the swords in their collection could become sword maidens, so they had tested them one by one. It was also because they had tested them one by one that the old Taoist priest in the refinement realm was very sure that there were no sword maidens among his Taoist priests. Compared to the disbelief of the old Taoist priest in the refinement realm, Yuan Kong was a little more excited. For some reason, this sword wielder with a scarred face gave Yuan Kong a strong sense of trust. He felt that this sword wielder was an omnipotent powerhouse. If he said that he could become a sword wielder, then he could definitely do it. I can't be wrong. The Yanjing base city has a unique method that can determine which person has successfully synchronized with which sword. I was walking around just now and happened to find Yuan Kong's sword Maiden. Guhan made up a story with a sincere look on his face. Of course, Yanjing did not have such a method to determine if a sword wielder and a sword maiden were compatible. Otherwise, there would be no need for mortals to go to the sword pavilion to conduct a sword inscription ceremony and experiment with one sword maiden after another. Guhan was just taking advantage of the fact that they were all NPCs in the dungeon and would not go to Yanjing to verify the method. That's great. The old Taoist priest in the refinement realm still had some doubts after listening to Guhan's explanation. However, it was never a bad thing to have another sword wielder, not to mention that this was a sword wielder that belonged to the Wu-Tang Mountain. Therefore, under Guhan's guidance, Yuan Kong and the old Taoist priest in the refinement realm walked into a side hall in the Skyward Palace. This side hall was dedicated to the statues of the snake and tortoise generals under Emperor Zhenwu. Among them, the statue of the snake general was carved into a general with the head of a human and the body of a snake. 4 pairs of scaly hands grew out of its back, and each hand held a treasure sword, a copper bell, a jade bottle, a halberd, a flag, a long saber, an iron hammer, a book, and a total of 8 other artifacts. Master of the refinement realm, you said that all the swords have been tested. May I ask, has that sword been tested? Guhan pointed at the sword among the 8 instruments and asked with a smile. Are you talking about the instrument in the snake general's hand? The old Taoist priest in the refinement realm was taken aback. Indeed, no one had ever tried that sword before. No one would have thought that there was another sword in the hands of the statue. But Almsgiver military governor, that sword is a wooden sword. I'm afraid it won't work. According to the knowledge of the refinement realm, a wooden sword could not become a sword maiden. That's not right. Master of the refinement realm, you may not know that among the famous swords, the number 1 sword maiden is a wooden sword. Guhan smiled and patted Yuan Kong's head. Hurry up and take down that wooden sword. Let me see if it's accurate or not. Yes. Yuan Kong did not wait for the old Taoist priest in the refinement realm to agree. He rushed forward and grabbed the hilt of the wooden sword. In an instant, a sword wielder was born. Congratulations, Master of the refinement realm. Guhan cupped his hands at the refinement realm. Chapter 71. When he first saw the frigid aqua sword's sword mistress form, even a serious person like Guhan could not help but laugh out loud. This sword mistress looked very similar to a certain cartoon character from 1,000 years ago, the snake demon from the Calabash Brothers. She was 1.8 meters tall and had extremely long legs that were 1.2 meters long. She had a head of snow-white hair and a body that was as slender as a willow in the wind. Of course, the thing that was most similar to the snake spirit was her slender waist. From afar it seemed that one could wrap one's arms around her entire waist. After all, the original owner of the frigid aqua sword was a snake demon under the command of Emperor Zhenwu. It was not surprising that she looked like a snake demon after being influenced by her master for a long time. However, Yuan Kong felt very awkward when he first saw his sword mistress. He was a Taoist priest. Why did he have to be paired with such an enchanting sword mistress? Just looking at her made him blush. If they were to stay together for a long time, wouldn't he be in a bad mood? Taoist Yuan Kong. Congratulations. Congratulations. Guhan stepped forward to congratulate him. After reaching the top of Wu-Tang Mountain, Guhan was no longer the serious and unsmiling person he used to be. He had become very cheerful and liked to smile. He even went back to congratulate an NPC. Of course, the reason for such a transformation wasn't because Guhan had become more cheerful and adorable. Instead, it was because Guhan had deliberately increased his favorability with the group of NPCs on Mount Wudong. The better their favorability was, the more obedient these NPCs would be, and the less likely they would cause trouble. I wouldn't dare. If it were not for military governor's guidance, Yuan Kong would never have come into contact with Shui Han. Naturally, he would have lived his life in a muddle. You are Yuan Kong's benefactor, and Yuan Kong will never forget it. Yuan Kong was so moved that tears streamed down his cheeks. He insisted on kneeling down and kowtowing to Gu Han before he would stop. Seeing that her sword wielder insisted on kneeling to someone else, Shui Han, who had just awakened, felt a surge of vexation in her heart. She opened her small cherry mouth and said in a sharp voice, "Yuan Kong, you useless thing. Since you've become my sword wielder, how can you casually kneel to some random person?" Shui Hanjian was halfway through his words when King Yu suddenly glared at him. Shui Hanjian immediately kept quiet out of fear and swallowed his words back into his stomach. "It's no big deal. It's nothing." Guhan hurriedly helped Yuan Kong up. "The Dark Dragon King's underlings will attack soon. We still need your strength to deal with this crisis together." "You're right, Military Governor. Yuan Kong will definitely—" "Wait, Military Governor, what did you just say? The Dark Dragon King's underlings are going to attack?" The Refinement Realm Old Taoist was shocked by Gohan's words. He quickly grabbed Gohan's hand and asked, "That's right. I forgot to tell you, Master of Refinement. My brother at the foot of the mountain just sent a message. The Dark Dragon King has already discovered that I've broken through his 18 blockade. He's now mobilizing his troops. I estimate that the first batch of underlings will attack in about 50 minutes. By the way, according to my brother's estimation, these Yuan Kos that are preparing to attack are much stronger than the previous Yuan Kos at the 18 blockades," Gohan said casually. Gohan said it casually, but the Refinement Realm Old Taoist could not remain calm. If every single one of them was stronger than the skeletons, would his Wu-Tang branch still be able to survive? The Refinement Realm Old Taoist looked at Gohan with a worried expression. Gohan understood and comforted him. "Don't worry, I've already contacted Yanjing Base City. Reinforcements will arrive in 5 hours. When the time comes, listen to my commands. I promise to protect everyone for the next 5 hours." Gohan's calm attitude infected the Refinement Realm Old Taoist, as he also calmed down a little. He bowed deeply to Gohan. "I'll leave everything to you, Military Governor." As mentioned before, there were 3 NPCs at the top of Wu-Tang Mountain who had the potential to become a sword-bearer. Among the 3, one was Taoist priest Yuan Kong, who was part of the group of Taoist priests. The other 2 were not part of the group of Taoist priests. They were 2 ordinary survivors. This time, the Refinement Realm was not by Gohan's side. Instead, he led his group of Taoist priests to do some things that Gohan had instructed him to do. Time was precious, so the Refinement Realm did not follow Gohan. Instead, he let Yuan Kong, who had just become a sword-bearer, stay by Gohan's side. At the same time, he also let Gohan guide Yuan Kong on some sword-bearer's general knowledge and combat basic. The area of Wu-Tang Mountain's Tianzhu Peak was quite large. It was about a few hundred acres of land. However, most of the land was made up of rocks, so it was impossible to grow crop. Only some of the leeward land had accumulated a lot of soil and was cultivated into a field. These fields were the only fields for the 700 people at the top of Wu-Tang Mountain. Originally, when Celestial Master Zhi Jing was still alive, there was a large piece of land in the middle of Wu-Tang Mountain that was also opened up by the survivors. At that time, the crops produced by the fields were enough to feed 1,000 people, and there was still excess. However, 3 days ago, the battle between the Dark Dragon King and Celestial Master Zhi Jing at the belly of the mountain had directly caused the fields there to be burned to ashes by the Dark Dragon King's dragon flames. The remaining fields at the top of the mountain were not enough to feed the 700 people. Even if the Dark Dragon King did not take the initiative to attack and instead sealed off the top of the mountain, the survivors would still starve to death. Because the land at the top of the mountain was precious, the exposed areas had been cultivated into fields. The survivors lived in man-made caves. The survivors who attempted to escape returned to their caves one after another and put down their luggage. However, very soon, they had to carry their luggage again because according to Gohan's plan, everyone had to be gathered in Skyward Palace and protected together. When the powerhouses from Yanjing City arrived, they would be taken away together. Otherwise, if one or two of them wandered outside and died in the hands of Yuan Ko, Gohan's SSS rating would be completely ruined. Gohan walked on the mountain path with ease. After 2 or 3 turns, he saw a rather beautifully built cave. On both sides of the cave's stone walls, there were 2 lively lions carved. It looked like the home of a nouveau riche. "We're here, it's here. According to my senses, there's a potential sword-bearer inside." Gohan pointed at the cave and said, "Almsgiver military governor, are you talking about here?" Yuan Kong laughed foolishly and shouted into the cave, "Dainyu, come out and receive the guest." The Dainyu that Yuan Kong was talking about was a strong man in his 30s. According to Yuan Kong, this man was the son of his martial uncle. His ancestor was also a sword-bearer, but his brain was not very good. He was in his 30s, but his IQ was like that of a 7 or 8-year-old child. He liked to play with Yuan Kong the most. A few years ago, his father was ambushed by the Yuan Zhen while protecting the villagers in the mountain and died in the field. Dainyu had no one to take care of him. If he was not as strong as an ox, he would have starved to death at the top of Wudong Mountain. Gohan told Dainyu about his goal, then pulled Yuan Kong and Shui Han to Dainyu to explain themselves. Dainyu clapped his hands and laughed foolishly. In fact, he did not know what Gohan meant. He only looked at the beautiful Shui Han behind Yuan Kong with envy and asked foolishly, "Can Dainyu marry such a beautiful wife like little Kong Kong?" If it was not for King Yu suppressing Shui Han with his eyes, she would have slashed Dainyu with her sword. According to the guide, Dainyu's sword mistress was not in the armory. After all, Dainyu's father was Yuan Kong's martial uncle and could be considered a member of the Wudong sect. When Dainyu was young, he had touched more than 1,000 swords, but not a single one had succeeded. Dainyu's sword was in another family's house. It was different from Dainyu's extravagant cave. This family's house was much more desolate. Her cave was located in the darkest part of Wudong Mountain. Even at noon, the inside of the cave was dark. The owner of this house was an old woman with wrinkles all over her face. She did not have any other reaction to Gohan's visit. She only muttered in a low voice, don't rush me, this old woman is still 1 day away from turning 60. Yuan Kong was a little embarrassed and sad as he waved his hand at Gohan. Grandma is old, her words and actions are muddled. Don't mind her. It's fine. Gohan smiled and brought Yuan Kong, Shui Han, and Dainyu to the deepest part of the cave. He pointed at the stone wall and said, "This sword is natural and is inside this stone wall. Shui Han, cut open this stone wall and see." "Who do you think you are? What nonsense are you spouting? What right do you have to order me to do this?" King Yu glared at Shui Han, and she immediately softened. She did not know why, but every time she looked at King Yu's eyes, she would feel a deep sense of insignificance and fear. In the end, Shui Han obediently used her sword to cut the stone wall. Gravel continuously fell, and soon, a large hole was dug. "Stop!" Gohan signaled Shui Han to stop. After the dust settled, he took a closer look. Within the hole, there was indeed a stone that looked like a sword hilt. It was inserted into the stone wall along with the sword. There really is a sword in here. Shui Han, who originally thought that Gohan was just spouting nonsense, felt like he had gone blind. Others might not be sure if the stone that looked like a sword hilt was a sword hilt or not, but as a sword mistress, Shui Han knew that it was indeed a sword hilt at first glance. But benefactor military governor, this sword is deeply embedded in the stone wall. How do we pull it out? Yuan Kong asked in confusion. That's easy. Guhan pulled Dainyu to the front of the hole and said softly, Dainyu, hold that sword hilt. As a result, another bright light shone out, illuminating the entire dark cave. Chapter 72. The Yu Ling sword was the name of the stone sword hidden in the wall. No one knew which genius player had found the Yu Ling sword in this mountain wall. But in reality, the awakening of the Yu Ling sword was a legendary story. 500 years ago, the third-generation wielder of the True Force sword brought it back to the Wutang Mountain to reminisce. Unfortunately, on the mountain, he bumped into Yuan Ko, one of the 4 heavenly kings of Yuan Ko's organization, Xiang Yu the Overlord. At that time, Xiang Yu the Overlord was arguing with Yu Ji and was chased out of the house. In a bad mood, he immediately started fighting with the wielder of the True Force sword. Xiang Yu the Overlord's brute strength was earth-shattering. The True Force sword, as the sword of Emperor Jinwu, was not weak either. The two fought for a day and a night without a clear winner. Both of their stamina and sword essence were exhausted. However, Xiang Yu the Overlord had an ultimate move, the Overlord's suicide. After the ability ended, he would lose 9,999% of his energy and vitality in exchange for 1 minute of peak condition. The wielder who had exhausted all his sword essence was no match for Xiang Yu the Overlord. This immortal-level wielder who had been accompanying the sword mistress to sweep the grave fell on the Wutang Mountain, becoming the second immortal-level sword wielder to be buried there. A minute later, Xiang Yu lay on the ground like a dead man. Within an hour, he would not be able to recover in any way. Anyone who came would be able to finish him off with a single blow. The area around the Wutang Mountain was usually deserted, and very few sword wielder would appear here. Xiang Yu the Overlord thought that he would be safe after resting for an hour. However, something like fate happened. A young man who looked like a savage came out with an ancient sword mistress. As a result, the universe-level Yuan Ko, the Overlord Xiang Yu, was killed by a mere ancient sword mistress. This was the only time in history that an ancient sword mistress had killed a universe-level Yuan Ko. The death of the divine sword-tier sword-bearer shocked the entire world. Many sword-bearers rushed to the Wudang Mountain to find out the truth. Only then did they realize that even Xiang Yu the Overlord had died. They even brought the little hero who had killed Xiang Yu back to the base city. Later, they found out that this little hero was the descendant of a family that was left behind when they retreated from the top of Mount Wudang. His sword Maiden was the Yu Ling sword in Danyo's hand. According to his own memory, this Yu Ling sword had rolled to his feet after a mudslide. The players of the future combined the plot of the Wudong Peak dungeon and came to the conclusion after scientific analysis that this little hero was most likely the descendant of Danyo. Danyo did not have a high IQ, so it was not impossible for him to have stayed behind during the retreat. Sword Maiden Yu Ling's appearance was very similar to Song Hama's cloud-cast iron sword. They were both strong and frighteningly masculine women who were more than 2 meters tall. When she stood next to Danyo, who was also very strong, they looked like a perfect match. Yu Ling's personality was a little dull. After she had awakened, she did not say a word. She only stood beside her quietly. When Yuan Kong and Gohan congratulated Danyo and Yu Ling, she did not say anything. Seeing that his good friend had also become a sword-bearer, Yuan Kong was even more excited and curious. Who would be the third person to become a sword-bearer? Military governor. Let's quickly find the third sword-bearer. Tell me where it is, and Yuan Kong will lead the way for you, Yuan Kong suggested. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Gohan waved his hand and smiled. The third sword-bearer is far away, but right in front of us. Right in front of us? Yuan Kong narrowed his eyes and scanned the entire cave. Other than himself, Gohan, Danyo, and the 3 sword maidens, King Yu, Shui Han, and Yu Ling, there was no one else. Oh, I understand now. Military governor, You must be talking about Uncle Wang who lives next door. I didn't expect him to also become a sword-bearer. Yuan Kong felt a little strange when he mentioned Uncle Wang. This kind of person could actually become a sword-bearer. This old pervert and bachelor was said to have harmed many widows and wives. He was a pest at the peak of Wudong Mountain. No, I'm not talking about the neighbor next door. Guhan waved his hand. That person is in this cave. Don't rush me, don't rush me. This old woman is still 1 day away from 60 years old. In the cave, the withered old woman who was about to shrink into a ball kept repeating this sentence. Military governor, are you sure your method did not make any mistakes? Looking at the cowering old woman who kept repeating, don't rush me, the refinement realm old Taoist felt a headache coming on. This inspector benefactor insisted that the old woman could become a sword wielder. He even insisted that he open the armory and find her sword Maiden for the old woman. If it weren't for Yuan Kong and Dinyo's example, he wouldn't have even bothered to find an excuse to dodge the question. The Wu-Tang faction's armory was located in the basement of the Skyward Palace. There were thousands of different kinds of treasured swords inside. These were all famous swords collected by the ancestors of the Wu-Tang faction over the past 800 years. The most eye-catching one was placed in the center of the armory. It was the True Force sword, which was held by the only brand new piece of red silk on the Wu-Tang Mountain. It was hard to imagine that this True Force sword, which looked no different from the swords sold at street stalls and used for square dancing, was the sword of the True Force Demon Emperor, a righteous god of the Heavenly Palace and one of the 4 saints of the North Pole. It was an immortal sword with the power to destroy heaven and earth. Oh, by the way, the leader of the 4 saints of the North Pole was the famous Marshal Tian Peng. Be it in real life or in the game, this was the first time Gohan saw an immortal sword Maiden. He took a good look at the True Force sword and turned his neck away. To him, immortal swords were still too far away. However, one day he would hold immortal swords or even emperor swords in his hands. Yuan Kong, go to the 7th row on your left and bring me the 5th sword from the top. Gohan ordered Yuan Kong. Yes, military governor. Yuan Kong did not hesitate for even 0.1 seconds after hearing Gohan's words. He immediately rushed over and found the sword Gohan mentioned. The refinement realm old Taoist's face darkened when he saw how obedient Yuan Kong was. This Yuan Kong did it without asking for his permission. Sect leader of refinement, do you know where this sword came from? The refinement realm old Taoist's face darkened when he heard Gohan's question. He used to be an elder in charge of teaching disciples. He only took over the management of the entire Wu-Tang sect after his fellow disciples and celestial master Zhijing died. Before that, the armory had always been managed by other disciples. He did not know anything about the armory at all. The refinement realm old Taoist stammered, unable to explain. This is the Skywalker sword. On the contrary, Yuan Kong quickly answered. Uncle Master told Yuan Kong that this is the Skywalker sword. Uncle Master also told Yuan Kong that there used to be a hero named Yi Tianxing who used this Skywalker sword. Yi Tianxing and the Patriarch, perfected Lord Qingshu Yuanmiao, were good friends. After hero Yi Tianxing died, he gave this sword to the Patriarch and it has been kept here ever since. So that's how it is. Guhan took the Skywalker sword and placed it in the hands of the old granny, and said gently, Old granny, please touch this sword. Touch. See? When the doddering old woman saw the Skywalker sword in front of her, she slowly stretched out her hand, wanting to touch it. However, when she was about to touch it, she suddenly retracted her hand. I don't want to die by this sword. I want to go to the valley to look for the old man. Do me a favor and let me go on my own. I'm still 1 day away from 60 years old. The old lady's words were somewhat baffling. She did not know what she was talking about, and her logic was a mess. However, Yuan Kong and Refinement Realm blushed when they heard that. Her words involved the deepest secret of the Wu-Tang Mountain. It was a secret that they were too ashamed to let outsiders know about. I told you to take it, so take it. Refinement Realm grabbed the old lady's hand and pressed it on the Skywalker sword. As expected, just as Gohan said, the sword shone brightly in the next moment. The old lady, who was 1 day away from 60 years old, had her belly bulging again. 5 minutes later, a sword lady dressed in a black gauze dress appeared. Her beauty was even more stunning than King Yu's. As she appeared, the 60-year-old old lady seemed to have aged even more. Chapter 73. System Announcement. Quest 4 completed. 1 hour of preparation time has passed. System Announcement. Main quest updated. Quest 5. The Dark Dragon King Zayunada's troops have begun attacking the mountain. The first wave of troops will attack in 20 minutes. Players, please organize your forces to defend. If more than 400 survivors die before Yanjing City's reinforcements arrive, the quest will be declared a failure, and the dungeon will end immediately. On the forum, there were many different ways to defend against Yuan Ko's attack for 4 hours. The trap method involved digging all sorts of traps at the top of Mount Wudong. The 4 symbols method involved arranging 4 teams of true marshals 7-section formation at 4 key locations. The door-blocking method involved the swordbearers not even staying at the top of the mountain and directly running to the place where Yuan Ko was spawning at the foot of the mountain to block the door. The snake-luring method involved using survivors as bait to lure a portion of Yuan Ko to the other side, and then going all out to eliminate the remaining Yuan Ko. In short, there were all sorts of strange methods and their effects varied. If one was lucky and strong enough, they could get an SSS rating. If one was unlucky and weak enough, it would be difficult to even get a B rating. However, Gohan, who had gathered 3 ancient sword tier NPC swordbearers, did not have to spend so much effort. He gathered all the villagers into the Palace of Heaven and closed the gate. Then, he had the 3 ancient sword tier swordbearers guard the large open space in front of the gate. Everything would be fine. Gohan only needed to deal with the more difficult Yuan Ko boss during the last 2 waves of attack. It would be enough for him to break through the defense circle and rush into the Palace of Heaven to kill. What Gohan had asked the old Taoist priest to do was to persuade all the survivors to hide in the Palace of Heaven and wait for Yanjing City's reinforcements. The Refinement Realm old Taoist had completed his mission very well. When the hour was up, almost all the survivors had appeared in Chaotian Palace. The reason why the word almost was used was because there were still 3 survivors who hadn't appeared in Chaotian Palace. No one knew where they were hiding. If Gohan did not find them and bring them to Skyward Palace, according to the previous player's experience, these 3 people would definitely die. For the players who didn't expect to get an SS rating or above, the 3 of them didn't matter. 3 people didn't matter much to a total of 400 players. It wasn't a big deal. If they died, they died. However, for someone like Gohan who was determined to obtain an SSS rank evaluation, this was probably the most troublesome aspect of the entire instance dungeon. The lowest death count for an SSS rating was 3 people, so he had to find these 3 people. There was no other way. At the start of the game, the 5 missing people would randomly appear in 25 locations. Players only needed to search one by one, and sooner or later, they would find the 3 missing survivors. Later on, perhaps because it didn't feel that it was difficult, the shameful system directly expanded the 25 locations to 750 locations. Among them, there were places that sounded very difficult, such as under the cliff, the top of the Golden Peak, and in the bushes. If they were to search one by one, even 10 hours wouldn't be enough. By then, it would be too late. However, the system didn't completely block the player's way. The system would use the NPCs' mouths to provide Gohan with 3 random clues. By analyzing these clues, Gohan could find the location of the 3 missing NPCs and bring them to Skyward Palace. Logically speaking, analyzing the location of the 3 missing survivors was something that was recognized by the players on the forum as having a difficulty of 200 out of 100. In the instance dungeon, it was impossible for players to connect to the forum and search for information about the 750 locations. Players had to be completely familiar with the terrain of Mount Wudong and memorize all the 750 locations in their heads before entering the instance dungeon. Only then would they be able to analyze the answer. It was like having your teacher draw 750 key points in your textbook before an exam and then have you memorize them all. In any case, most players had given up on searching for the 3 people. At the very most, they would just have to spend more effort on other areas. There was still a chance of getting an SS rating. Even for a genius like Gohan, memorizing 750 locations consumed a lot of brain cells. It took him about 4 hours to memorize all 750 locations. A system prompt. Side quest has been triggered. Search for the 3 missing survivors. There is no penalty for failing the quest. After the quest is completed, a random instance dungeon reward will be increased by 1 level. System prompt. Player military governor can go to the NPC and ask for clues about the first missing person. Randomly increasing a certain instance dungeon reward by 1 level was something that depended on luck. If one's luck was bad, it would only increase a 1 yuan RMB reward to 2 yuan RMB reward. However, if one's luck exploded and it was used on the capsule machine, the white capsule turned blue, the blue became purple, the purple became gold, the gold became so far, no one knew what was on the golden capsule. There was no need to say anything else. This side quest must be completed. Gohan obtained the first clue from the old Taoist priest who was in the refinement realm. Clue 1. Missing survivor Li Dachui was a bald bachelor. The last person who saw him said that he was running near the cloud platform with a red cloth strip in his hand yesterday. With a cursory look at this clue, one would be at a loss as to what to do. A red cloth strip running in the direction of the cloud platform. What the hell could this kind of useless clue be analyzed? However, in less than 10 seconds, Gohan said to King Yu, "Stay here and protect Skyward Palace with Yuan Kong and the others. If there's any news, contact me through the sword mark. I'll be back soon." After saying that, Gohan ran out. 5 minutes later, he returned to Skyward Palace with Wang Dachui, who had a broken thigh. He threw him to the old Taoist priest who was in charge of maintaining order in Skyward Palace. The old Taoist priest was shocked. The old Taoist priest could not wait to ask, "How did you find Li Dachui, military governor?" "My 3 disciples searched for a long time, but to no avail. There's a lack of dye on the top of Mount Wudong, so the cloth is usually gray, white, and black. Red cloth is very rare. On the top of Mount Wudong, there's only one place where red cloth can be found, and that is an acacia tree on the top of Mount Wudong. There's a red scarf tied to the top of the tree. The red scarf on the acacia tree symbolizes love, so I rushed to the acacia tree first and found a comb that Li Dachui had lost on the ground. Li Dachui was a bald man and a bachelor, so why would he need a comb? This comb must be his woman's comb. This means that he stole the red cloth strip while he was running for his life and went to his mistress's house to please her. The houses near the Yuntai are very good and there are even fewer women. There are only 3 households. I looked around the 3 women's houses, and in the end, I found a half-burnt red scarf in a pile of firewood in one of the households. I looked around the house and found this guy in a pit. His leg was broken by someone. According to him, when he was meeting his mistress yesterday, he was discovered by her man. He broke his leg and threw him into the pit, leaving him to fend for himself. Sure enough, as soon as Li Dachui entered Chaotian Palace, he immediately dragged his broken leg and went to find trouble with his mistress and her man. For a moment, Chaotian Palace was in chaos. Military Governor, you're very meticulous. This old Taoist admires you. Respect. This old Taoist watched Dachui grow up. I didn't expect him to be in the mood to flirt when he was about to run for his life. He deserved to have a broken leg. The old Taoist priest sighed. What's so strange about that? Who knows, he might not be able to survive today. Before he dies, he wants to have some fun. The two survivors beside the old Taoist priest laughed and told the truth. All of you, shut up. He kicked the two fellows who didn't know their place. There are still 2 missing people. I'll have to trouble Military Governor to find them. The second missing person is called Chen Xiaochue. She lives near the Rising Sun Pavilion. She's a 7-year-old girl. This morning, she told her mother that she was going to watch the sunrise, but there's still no news of her. There are many places on Mount Wudong where you can see the sunrise. Among the 750 locations, there are more than 60 places where you can see the sunrise. Gohan pondered. But with the girl's physique, it's impossible for her to go too far. She should be near the Rising Sun Pavilion, so the number of locations has been reduced from 60 to 20. Out of these 20 locations, 17 of them are too dangerous. It's too dangerous for a 7-year-old girl. Therefore, the remaining 3 locations are the most likely. Gohan quickly ran to the 3 locations he had thought of. However, he couldn't find a single girl. She's not in a safe place. That means the girl must have gone to those dangerous places to watch the sunrise out of curiosity. Maybe she's trapped there. Gohan spent another 10 minutes searching through the 17 dangerous locations. However, he still couldn't find anything. Could my analysis be wrong? Chen Xiaochue isn't near the Rising Sun Pavilion to watch the sunrise? Just as Gohan was about to leave the Rising Sun Pavilion, he suddenly noticed that the soil and rocks around his feet were very wet. A moment of carelessness and he would slip and fall down the cliff. Not good. Could it be that the girl accidentally slipped down the cliff? The moment this thought popped up, Gohan quickly overturned it. If the girl had fallen down, she would undoubtedly die. The system would never allow him to find a dead person. However, what if the girl did not die after falling down? The protagonist falls down the cliff, gets caught by the bushes, and survives. Isn't that a standard plot? With that thought in mind, Gohan walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. Sure enough, a little girl with tattered clothes was lying on a branch that extended out from the cliff. The rising and falling of her body proved that this lucky NPC was still alive. Chapter 74. Military Governor, the first wave of Yuan Ko has arrived. Just as Gohan was about to save the NPC girl, King Yu sent a message through the sword mark. One thing to note was that King Yu called Gohan by his in-game name, and not the despicable person he used to call him. Destroy them. That was all Gohan said. Ha, just a bunch of skeletons. This king can finish them off in 10 seconds. Gohan ended the sword mark connection. In Gohan's plan, because he had 3 ancient sword wielders to help him, he didn't have to worry about defending for the first 3 hours. Besides the last hour, he had to be there. The rest of the time, he could just leave it to King Yu. The most important thing now was to save the NPC girl. Gohan estimated the distance between him and the tree branch. It was around 30 meters. Most mortals or swordsmen would find a rope to tie around their waist and slowly descend from the cliff when faced with such a situation. However, Gohan did not have the time or interest to look for a rope. After thinking for less than 3 seconds, he found the spot directly above the little girl's current position and leaped off the cliff. According to the acceleration formula of gravity in junior high school physics, it was easy to calculate the falling time from a height of 30 meters. T equals the square root 2h slash g equals the square root 2 by 30 by 9. 8, which was about 425 5 seconds wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. Most people could estimate it to be 25 seconds if they practiced a little. However, in the situation of free falling from the sky, with the cliff beside him, there were not many people who could calmly estimate that they would last for 25 seconds. Fortunately, Guhan was one of them. In an instant, too. 5 seconds later, Guhan raised the poverty sword in his hand and stabbed it into the cliff with all his might. If an ordinary iron sword was plunged into a hard rock while falling at high speed, 10 out of 10 of them would break into two. However, for the sword lady's main body, the chinpin sword, it was not worth mentioning. Like cutting tofu, the chinpin sword easily stabbed into the rock. Under Guhan's gravitational force, it even drew a half-meter-long sword mark before it stopped falling and hung on the cliff with Guhan. Guhan's movements were not small, and it scared Chen Xiaochue, who was crying with her head buried in her hands. She carefully raised her head and saw a godlike hero appear in front of her. He stretched out a hand and said, "Don't cry, Big Brother is here to save you." The little girl with the hammer threw herself into Guhan's arms like a swallow. This little girl was very cute, especially her big eyes, which gave off the feeling of Arale. When she was in Guhan's arms, she got a good look at this great hero and was immediately shocked. This hero's face was so scary, and there were so many worms. "Big Brother, was your face beaten up by those bad guys?" The little girl was young and could not suppress her curiosity. She directly asked about the origin of the scar on Guhan's face. "No." Guhan shook his head. He wanted to say that the scar was caused by himself, but he swallowed the words when they reached his mouth. "When you were young, Big Brother didn't listen to Mom and Dad and fell on his own. Just like this time, if you really fell, your parents would be so sad." The branch that supported Chen Xiaochue was quite tough. An adult like Guhan could also withstand it. It just so happened that it could help Guhan return. Guhan gathered his strength and leaped up. He actually jumped more than 20 meters high, but this was not enough to return to the cliff. When he reached the highest point, Guhan stabbed the chinpin sword into the rock and used the chinpin sword to jump again, successfully jumping back to the cliff. "Big Brother, do you think that Chen Xiaochue is a bad child? That's why you have to specially come to save him." Chen Xiaochue, who was on Guhan's back, said meekly, "I'm very curious. Why did you come to watch the sunrise today?" "We clearly agreed to leave this place," Guhan asked. "Little Chue knows that we're leaving Mount Wudong, so he wants to see the sun of Mount Wudong one last time. Mom said that we can never return to Mount Wudong." Chen Xiaochue's voice was full of melancholy. It was hard to imagine that a 6-year-old child could be so sensitive. When Guhan carried little Chue back to Skyward Palace, the first wave of skeletons had all been reduced to bone dust. According to Yuan Kong, Queen Yu had performed very bravely. His frigid aqua sword had just killed 2 skeletons, and the rest had been smashed by King Yu. Well, this was not strange. After all, King Yu was a famed sword maiden. If these were given to ancient sword maidens, these skeletons probably wouldn't even be able to take one hit from King Yu. However, it was not easy for King Yu to kill all the skeletons in such a short time. This proved that, under Guhan's special training, King Yu's sword skills had already reached a basic level. It could be described as not bad. After sending little Chue's sister back to her parents, whose eyes were swollen from crying, the mother blamed herself. She blamed herself for allowing little Chue to watch the sunrise. She never would have thought that little Chue, who had seen the sunrise hundreds of times without any problems, would fall off the cliff this time. After little Chue's parents thanked them profusely, the refinement old Taoist sent them the last clue of the missing person. Actually, this missing person was a little special. It was not that they could not find him, but that the Taoists could not persuade him to come to Skyward Palace. This person was the only senior uncle of the refinement old Taoist. He was old and could not go out to fight, so he was put in charge of guarding Wudong's scripture pavilion. He said that he was old, and there was no point in escaping. He wanted to die with the scripture pavilion that he had guarded for most of his life. Everyone knew that this kind of stubborn old man who did not want to live was the hardest to deal with. In addition, his seniority was higher than the refinement old Taoist, so the people who were in charge of persuading him did not dare to force him. So he became one of the 3 missing people. The Taoists were not easy to deal with, but it did not mean that Gohan, an outsider, was not easy to deal with. Compared to the previous 2 missing people, who needed to spend a lot of time and brains to find, this old stubborn man was easier. When he arrived at the place, he just needed to knock him out and bring him back to Skyward Palace. Mount Wudong's scripture pavilion was located in another call 1,000 meters away from Skyward Palace. It contained all kinds of Taoist classics and secret martial arts manuals from Mount Wudong for the past 600 years. If it was any other time, Gohan, as an outsider, would definitely not be able to enter the scripture depository pavilion. Surrounding this scripture depository pavilion, there would definitely be many schemes and plots. Just look at the Shaolin Temple's scripture depository pavilion from Old Man Jin Yong's novel. But now, everyone in the Wu-Tang sect, who still counted on Gohan to be the only one in Yanjing City, had no objection to Gohan, an outsider, entering the scripture pavilion. If it were not for Gohan's refusal, they would have sent a few Taoists to lead the way for Gohan. When he opened the old, squeaky door of the scripture pavilion, he heard an old voice saying, "Didn't I tell you little guys that I, an old Taoist, will die in this scripture pavilion even if I die?" Gohan was very disgusted with this kind of stubborn old man. He did not want to live, but he still wanted to drag others to die with him. The key was that he thought his behavior was very noble, and that he was free from vulgar interests. Therefore, he did not intend to be polite and rushed straight into the depths of the scripture pavilion. There, an old Taoist with completely white hair sat on a rattan chair, holding an ancient scripture from an unknown era. The old Taoist was old, but his eyesight was not bad. He could tell at a glance that Gohan was not one of them. "You are not from the Wu-Tang sect." He blew his beard and said sternly, "Get out! This is not a place where outsiders like you can come in. Old thing, I don't have time to waste with you." Gohan walked forward, picked up Ching Pin's sword, and planned to hit the old man's head with the back of the sword. The old Taoist saw that the situation was not good, so he grabbed the book in his hand and threw it at Gohan, then turned around and wanted to escape. Not to mention, this old Taoist's foundation was not bad. With such an old body, he still had the strength to resist. As he ran, he scolded Gohan, "You crazy animal, you actually want to attack an old man like me, an old man in his 70s or 80s. Do you still have any moral heart? Get out of here quickly, and this old man will forgive you, young man. Otherwise, when the disciples of the Wu-Tang sect arrive, you are dead. But it was your disciple who asked me to bring you there." Gohan sighed and caught up with the frightened old Taoist in a few steps. He hit the old Taoist hard on the head. As for whether or not there would be any sequelae like a concussion, Gohan did not care. As long as he did not kill the old Taoist, it would be fine. When the old Taoist fell, his face was full of unwillingness and disbelief. Did the young people nowadays not know the traditional Chinese virtues of respecting the elderly? Gohan picked up the old Taoist with one hand and tucked him under his armpit. Just as he was about to immediately go to the Sutra Pavilion, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. That was because he noticed that the book under his feet, the book that the old Taoist had just thrown at him, looked very familiar. Gohan bent down and picked up the book with his other hand. With just a glance at the cover, he instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. The old Taoist, who was tucked under his armpit, also fell to the ground, and his head hit the floor again. So, what kind of book was this? Chapter 75. In Gohan's heart, there had always been a huge question, and that was, who exactly was his ancestor? According to the 3 sets of peerless sword techniques that had been passed down from his ancestor might really have been an emperor sword-level sword wielder who stood at the peak of sword-bearers and led the entire human world. However, if his ancestor was really an emperor sword-level sword wielder, how could he have grown up in the honeycomb building? His parents could not live in the core area and enjoy the safest living environment. Even the descendants of the Ming Yuan Jiandi, who had betrayed humanity in exchange for immortality, had lost all kinds of privileges, but they were still permanently settled in the core area and enjoyed a safe life. Guhan could not understand, so he searched through countless historical materials, but he could not find a Jiandi with the surname Gu. Even if his ancestor had changed his surname, there should be records of a Jiandi with no descendant. However, all the Jiandi had left a clear genealogy of their descendants in the materials. In other words, they all had direct bloodlines, and they had nothing to do with Guhan. In the end, Guhan concluded that either the information passed down by his ancestor was a lie, or there was no such thing as an emperor sword-level sword wielder ancestor, and these 3 secret manuals were all picked up, or that his ancestor had made an even worse mistake than the Ming Yuan Jiandi, and the human world had completely erased all records of his ancestor. The above was all Guhan's own speculation. He had never found any clues about his ancestor, but now, he had found one. The clue was in his hands, the ancient book with the words, "Ninth Heaven Mysterious Sword," written on the cover. That's right, the ancient book that Guhan was holding in his hands, which the old Taoist priest had used to hit him, was one of the 3 secret manuals passed down in Guhan's family, Ninth Heaven Mysterious Sword. Flipping open this secret manual, he was even more certain of this, because the first page was densely packed with the general outline of the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword, and it was exactly the same as the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword passed down by Guhan's ancestors. The secret manual that I'm so proud of is actually placed in a game's instance dungeon. Any player can see it. Doesn't this mean that the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword is not my ancestor's unique secret manual? It's a piece of trash that can be found on the streets. Thinking of this, Guhan suddenly had a bad feeling. Anyone who found out that something they treasured was casually placed in a dungeon like Jin Ping Mei would feel like their whole life was about to collapse. They would be like an idiot. No. Something's wrong. Guhan immediately realized that something was wrong. If this 9th Heaven Mysterious Sword is really so common that players can read it at will, why can't I find any information about it on the forum? This is impossible. Thinking of this, Guhan's trembling hand flipped to the second page, and then he was stunned. The second page was actually empty. Guhan immediately flipped through the pages at the back of the book until he finished flipping through the entire secret manual. Finally, he was sure that other than the general outline of the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword written on the first page, there were only a few blank pages left in the book. The 9 most important sword techniques of the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword, as well as the method to circulate qi, were not recorded at all. If it was just a general outline on a piece of paper, then it would be inexplicable to the players and even the sword owner. It was a worthless thing, no different from garbled code. No wonder this instance dungeon had been open for more than 200 years, but no players had ever mentioned the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword in the forum. Even if they saw it, they would probably think that it was a useless piece of paper made up by the system to tease the players. They would have no idea that this was actually the general outline of a peerless sword technique. Then a new question arose. Why would his family's ancestral sword technique appear on a page of the general outline in this Wudong's finest instance dungeon? On the way back to Chaotian Palace with the unconscious old Taoist, after throwing him into the care of the microcosm, when King Yu and the other 3 sword ladies fought with the invading Yuan Ko outside Chaotian Palace, Guhan did not say a word, as if he had lost his soul. He silently thought about the relationship between the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword and this instance dungeon. In the end, after spending a full hour, he came up with a conjecture that Gohan felt was 80% reliable. First of all, when Bat was designing the game instance, it would actively collect all kinds of information from the internet or physical literature. With Bat's supercomputing power, the information it collected was definitely hundreds of thousands of times more than what Gohan collected. So it was not surprising to find information about the Nine Heavens mysterious sword in some corner. In other words, it must have been recorded in some information that in the Wu-Tang Sect's Sutra Pavilion at the top of Mount Wudong, there was this Nine Heavens mysterious sword secret manual, and that information also gave the general outline of the Nine Heavens mysterious sword. That information only had the general outline. The Nine Heavens mysterious sword was a martial arts secret manual of the Middle Ages. Before the Great Calamity, Wudong Mountain had been the leading force of the martial arts world for over 600 years. This Nine Heavens mysterious sword should have been stored in the scripture depository by Wudong Mountain sometime during those 600 years. Gohan also learned from the information that in the 200 years after the apocalypse, Wu-Tang Mountain had always been isolated from the world, and the Sutra Pavilion had never been destroyed or stolen. In other words, the information obtained by Bat was spread after the Battle of the Dark Dragon King ended with the survivors of Wu-Tang Mountain heading to Yanjing headquarters city. According to historical records, in reality, during the Battle of the Dark Dragon King, the survivors at the top of Mount Wudong suffered heavy casualties. When the immortal sword-level sword-bearers sent by Yanjing headquarters city arrived to fight with the Dark Dragon King and defeated him, there were less than 300 survivors left from the top of Mount Wudong. This clue of the Nine Heavens mysterious sword must have been sent to Yanjing headquarters city along with all the other books in the Sutra Pavilion, and then passed down to the hands of its own ancestors, becoming the Gu family's heirloom. Gohan made up his mind. When this mission was over, he would immediately go online to search for information about the Sutra Pavilion on Wu-Tang Mountain, or the news of the 300 survivors. Perhaps they had left behind records or told their descendants about who had obtained the secret manuals in the Sutra Pavilion in the end. When Gohan finally sorted out these things with great difficulty, more than an hour had passed. Gohan, who was in a much better mood, walked out of Skyward Palace to observe the situation of the battle outside. He discovered that the new wave of Yuan Ko had already been wiped out. However, apart from King Yu, who was still excited and full of fighting spirit, the other three sword maidens more or less showed signs of exhaustion. This was especially true for the Skywalker sword. Perhaps it was because its wielder, the old granny, was too old and too slow-witted, so the Skywalker sword could not receive any sword essence from the wielder. She had been relying on the sword essence she had obtained from the old granny when she had awakened. After fighting for so long, there was not much sword essence left in her body. However, the old granny wielding the Skywalker sword was already completely confused. It was impossible to expect her to take the initiative to deliver the sword essence, but the sword maidens could not actively absorb the sword essence from the sword bearer. The only thing they could do now was to let the Skywalker sword withdraw from the battle and conserve the little sword essence left in her body. Therefore, Gohan immediately told the Skywalker sword to withdraw from the battle and conserve the sword essence. The sword maiden, Tian Xing, hesitated for a while and looked at her sword bearer who was curled up on the ground. Gohan was not her sword bearer. Giving orders to her was completely overstepping his authority. It was also a very rude thing to do. Tian Xing could completely ignore Gohan's orders. However, in the end, Tian Xing withdrew from the battle without a word. There was not much sword essence left in her body. Why can Tian Xing withdraw, but we have to fight like idiots? This is not fair. When the sword maiden, Shui Han, saw that Tian Xing had withdrawn, she immediately became indignant. If Yuan Kong had not forcefully pulled her hand, Shui Han would have withdrawn after Tian Xing. I will be in charge of the area where Tian Xing is defending. That should be fine, right? Gohan took out his chinpin sword. In the entire instance dungeon, it was basically King Yu who was fighting. He was getting a little itchy. What a joke. You're just a human. What abilities do you have? Why did you come here and cause trouble? You think you're so great just because you have a sword, Maiden. Before Shui Han could finish speaking, a long sword was pressed against her throat. Say that again. What's so great about me? Shui Han's words did not do anything to Gohan, but King Yu was enraged. The conflict was temporarily suppressed. Soon, another wave of Yuan Ko arrived. This time, Yuan Ko had 10 Ghostface spiders. King Yu took the lead and rushed forward alone, blocking 2 Ghostface spiders. Another Ghostface spider rushed into the area that Cold Water and Yu Ling were in charge of defending. These Ghostface spiders did not have strong attack power, but they could spit out poisonous webs. Once caught in the web, they would immediately enter a state of paralysis. They would be unable to move and could only let the Ghostface spider bite them. Just one Ghostface spider was enough to make Cold Water feel very distressed. She was only a grade 9 sword maiden and could only use one basic skill, Cold Strike. The rest of the skills, advanced skills, and ultimate skills could only be unlocked when she reached grade 7, grade 4, or grade 1. Before her sword could even touch the Ghostface spider, it spat out an extremely sticky white paste like poisonous web. She was immediately unable to move and was bitten a few times by the Ghostface spider. When the effects of the poisonous web disappeared, Shui Han prepared to attack frantically to vent her dissatisfaction. However, another poisonous web was spat out and she was paralyzed for another 5 seconds. When Shui Han exhausted all her strength and consumed more than half of the shield's energy, she finally killed this Ghostface spider. She fiercely breathed a sigh of relief, and remembered that there were 6 Ghostface spiders besieging that pretentious human. With a powerful sword-level personal shield, that human would not die for a while. However, he would definitely be tied up like a mummy, and would be ruthlessly trampled and humiliated by the 6 ghost-faced spiders. He would take this opportunity to make fun of this arrogant sword-bearer. He would tell him to hide in Skyward Palace and not cause trouble for himself. Where are the spiders? Cold Water looked over and saw that the human was leisurely standing in the same place, watching the gradually setting sun. The 6 ghost-faced spiders that had besieged him before had completely disappeared. It must be that famous sword who saved her master. Useless human, always causing trouble for his sword Maiden. Cold Water thought with certainty. Chapter 76. After the ghost-faced spider was destroyed, the frigid water sword and Yu Ling sword recovered some of their shield energy. Then, the next wave of Yuan Ko charged forward. This time, there were more than 20 desert wolves. They were different from the wolves in the King of Yu Gojian sword instance dungeon. These 20 desert wolves were stronger and could spit out fireballs. They could already be classified as demonic beasts. Moreover, there was a powerful wolf king among the pack of desert wolves that had come to attack. A wolf pack with a wolf king and a wolf pack without a wolf king were 2 completely different concepts. Without the alpha wolf, the pack of wolves would have already rushed up together and attacked randomly without any order to it. However, a wolf pack with a wolf king would attack and defend in an orderly manner. They could even set up formations, such as now. Under the Wolf King's command, the 20 desert wolves did not charge forward recklessly. Instead, they lined up in a few formations and faced off against King Yu and the other 2 sword ladies. This Wolf King seemed to be judging the abilities of King Yu and the other 2 sword ladies and what tactics to use. Shui Han tightened her grip on the frigid water sword. The Wolf King's crimson eyes were filled with killing intent and threat, causing Shui Han's pores to open up. This is a vicious enemy. This is going to be a cruel battle. Shui Han silently thought as she mobilized all the power in her body. She knew that this battle would not be as simple as the previous ones. Whoa! The Wolf King suddenly howled. Shui Han's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that the wolf pack was about to attack. As expected, the moment the Wolf King howled, 8 of the desert wolves under his command split into 2 groups and charged toward Shui Han, Guhan, King Yu, and Yu Ling. The 2 desert wolves quickly tangled with Shui Han. These wolves were incredibly fast, and their attacks were also quite good. Their teamwork was very exquisite. Although they couldn't break Shui Han's shield for a while, they were still able to restrict Shui Han to a very small area. Shui Han couldn't move to help the others. Why didn't this Wolf King send out all his forces? Shui Han was puzzled. 2 desert wolves were already very strenuous for him. If he were to send all his wild wolves, he would really be done for. Soon, Shui Han's confusion was answered. It wasn't that the remaining wolves didn't participate in the attack, it was just that they didn't need to fight close to Shui Han. The dozen wolves opened their mouths at the same time. Within their mouths, a scarlet fireball was gathering energy. Not good, they're relying on fireballs to attack us. Shui Han immediately understood the wolf pack's plan. He first sent a portion of the wolf pack to separate and entangle each sword maiden, restricting their movements. Then, he ordered the rest of the wolves to use fireballs and focus fire on one of them. This was similar to when players fought a boss. The main tank would tank the boss and pull its aggro. Mages, hunters, and other classes would deal damage from a distance and focus fire on the boss. However, the situation was now reversed. The players had become the boss, and the monsters were killing the boss. By the time Shui Han understood this, the desert wolves had finished preparing their fireballs. They could shoot them at any time. What terrified Shui Han even more was that the mouths of the dozen or so desert wolves were all aimed at his current position. This is bad. Shui Han sucked in a breath of cold air. If a dozen fireballs hit him, even if he didn't die, he would at least lose a layer of skin. He might even use up half of his shield's remaining energy. It's too late. Shui Han despaired as he swept away the 2 desert wolves around him. Then, he threw himself to the ground and buried his face in the ground, trying to avoid the damage from the fireballs as much as possible. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Why haven't the fireballs hit me yet? Puzzled, Shui Han risked raising his head. Then, he was so shocked that he couldn't lower his head anymore. Guhan, who he viewed as a burden, had charged into the pack of wild wolves that were preparing to shoot their mouths off. Guhan slashed at the wild wolves' vitals, one after another. Every slash was a perfect explosion of damage. Occasionally there would be 1 or 2 sure kill damage. In Shui Han's eyes, Guhan was like a surfer swimming on the sea. He swam freely among the wolves without any hindrance. Every time he swam, a wild wolf would die. Even the angry Wolf King, facing Guhan, only took a few more strikes than the ordinary wild wolves in the desert. Then, it became a corpse and was sucked back to the 2D world by the dimensional vortex. The whole process was as smooth as a musical and could not be stopped. Compared to the wild wolves in the King of Ugojian's Sword Instance dungeon, the current Guhan was far superior in terms of damage, fluidity, and strangeness of his swordsmanship. This wasn't strange. At that time, Guhan relied on a mortal's physique to fight. But now Guhan had half of King of Yu's physique. The effect of fighting was naturally different. After killing all the wild wolves, Guhan also killed the 2 desert wolves beside Shui Han. He patted Shui Han's shoulder and praised, "Not bad. You know that lying down is the best choice. The next wave of attacks will take about 10 minutes. You can take a good rest and try to recover all the energy in your shield." Cold Water Sword didn't know what expression to show. A human that he had looked down on just moments ago was now displaying such power. He even patted his shoulder and praised him. Should he find a cliff and jump off? Just as Shui Han was feeling ashamed, there was a commotion in the originally quiet Skyward Palace. Then, there was the sound of smashing things and cursing. It seemed like something huge had happened inside. Could it be that Spectre Napodi is here? Gohan's expression darkened. After instructing King of Yu and the others not to leave their positions, he quickly ran back into Skyward Palace. Among the primordial specters that attacked Skyward Palace, there was a wave of ghost primordial specters. They were silent and invisible. Without the help of the sword ladies of the demonic path, it was almost impossible to detect the traces of these specters. These specters couldn't attack anyone directly. They didn't have any attack abilities, but they could possess the bodies of mortal NPCs and control them to hurt the people around them. This was a wave of attacks that was very difficult to defend against. No matter how good the defense outside was, the survivors in Skyward Palace couldn't deal with the people around them. A lot of players fell at this stage. It wasn't easy to clear out the specters, but the number of survivors who died was more than 10 to 20. After discovering the huge commotion in Skyward Palace, Gohan thought that the wave of specters had appeared ahead of time. If that was the case, there should have been deaths in Skyward Palace by now. Gohan's SSS-rated target was basically out of the question. Fortunately, when Gohan entered Skyward Palace, there were no casualties. There was only an old man who was constantly smashing various items in Skyward Palace. A group of Taoist priests followed behind him and tried to persuade him, but none of them dared to stop him. The person who could make the Taoist priests hesitate was none other than the old Taoist priest, who was a generation higher than the refinement realm, who had been knocked out by Gohan with the back of his sword. The other Taoist priests were his disciples and grand disciples. None of them dared to stop him. They could only let him vent his anger in Skyward Palace. "You bunch of trash, I raised you up for nothing. You actually let an outsider knock out your martial granduncle in the Sutra Pavilion. You're useless. Hurry up and catch that person. I'm going to teach him a lesson." People nowadays don't even remember the basic respect for the old and love the young. The old man was throwing a tantrum in Skyward Palace. He scolded his disciples and grand disciples in a loud voice. These disciples and grand disciples all lowered their heads and didn't speak, allowing the old man to insult them. Old man who takes advantage of his seniority. Seeing this scene, Gohan regretted going easy on him. It would have been better if he had beaten him into a vegetative state. That way, he wouldn't have to make a fuss here. When the old man heard Gohan's voice, he turned his head and saw that his enemy had already appeared in front of him. He was instantly furious. He pointed at the young Taoist priests behind him and ordered, "You guys, catch that brat of yours." The young Taoist priests looked at the old Taoist priest and then at Gohan. They suddenly felt that they were in a dilemma. Logically speaking, since the martial granduncle had given the order, they should resolutely carry it out. However, the person in front of them was not an ordinary person. He was a sword-bearer sent by Yanjing Bay City. More than 700 people in Skyward Palace were all counting on Gohan to survive. Now that they had angered Gohan, he would send their reinforcements back with just one word. What should they do? Moreover, they had clearly seen the situation outside just now. If it wasn't for Gohan's Lord Yu in front of them, the three sword ladies on their side would definitely not be able to hold on for long and would definitely be defeated. By then, it would be difficult for them to escape death. Therefore, this Gohan must not be angered. Therefore, this group of young Taoist priests very wisely chose to be coward. Refinement was the only person qualified to comfort the old Taoist priest. He patted the old Taoist priest's back and kept saying something. "Calm down, don't lower yourself to the level of a child. He's also doing it for your own good. He wants to protect your safety and things like that in an attempt to appease the old Taoist priest's anger." The old Taoist priest's actions made Gohan feel a lot of anger in his heart. He was just a lousy NPC, what was he trying to do to him? However, at this time, the situation seemed to have calmed down. Gohan decided to let it go. He walked in front of Refinement and said, "Look after everyone here. If there's a fight, we'll all die together." After saying this, Gohan turned around and left. He did not want to stay in this crowded skyward palace anymore. However, unexpectedly, the old Taoist priest was still upset. Seeing that Gohan had no intention of apologizing to him, he casually scolded, "Little bastard who was born and raised by a mother." Well, he instantly exploded. Chapter 77. Since he grew up as an orphan, his mother and family became the most important and beautiful memories in Gohan's heart. When this memory was mercilessly insulted, then Gohan would retaliate without hesitation. If this was in real life, the person Gohan would beat up wouldn't dare say a bad word about his mother for the rest of his life. However, this was a game. Erasing a bunch of data wasn't a burden for Gohan at all. What are you trying to do? The old Taoist priest was probably frightened by Gohan's murderous aura. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. However, he still stubbornly said, "It's too late for you to apologize. I won't accept your apology. Hurry up and scram." Cough cough. Gohan grabbed the old Taoist priest's throat and locked his windpipe tightly with one hand. The old Taoist priest's breathing was blocked. He was like a pig about to be slaughtered. He grabbed Gohan's wrist with both hands and struggled continuously. "Military Governor Benefactor. You can't do this, you can't do this. Let's talk this out." Refinement panicked. He hurriedly pulled on Gohan's clothes and tried to persuade him. "Master of Refinement, I'm going to kill him." Gohan's hand shook and was shaken a few meters away by Refinement. "I don't care if you agree or not. I'm going to kill him. If you have any objections, then leave this place and go die outside." At this point, Gohan looked at the young Taoist priests who were ready to make a move. "You guys are the same. If you want to stop me, then be prepared to die with this martial granduncle of yours. It's just a dungeon. At worst, we can just start over again." Although the Taoist priests didn't understand what a dungeon and starting over meant, it was obvious that he looked down on them and didn't care about their lives. Compared to their own lives, the life of an old man who was about to die was nothing. A few hot-blooded Taoist priests wanted to rush out to save him. However, they were held back by the people next to them. They secretly advised, "Don't go against that demon. When we get to Yanjing City, it's not too late to complain to the government." Unfortunately, these Taoist priests did not know that when Gohan left this world, they would be formatted into a bunch of data streams. Gohan grabbed the old Taoist's neck and walked out of the back door of the Skyward Palace. After walking a dozen meters out of the door, there was a cliff that was thousands of meters high. What do you want?" The old Taoist struggled and asked with difficulty. "Nothing much. I just want to throw you down so that you can complain to my mother about my upbringing," Gohan replied coldly. After that, he let go of the old Taoist's neck. However, the old Taoist didn't fall down. Instead, he sat on the edge of the cliff. The old priest didn't run. Instead, he sat there without moving and laughed out loud. "Kid, interesting. Since you want to kill me, why did you save me from the Sutra Depository just now? I'm saving you because your life is valuable. I'm killing you because you're despicable," Gohan said coldly. "Ha ha ha ha, Master said that one day I would die because of my stubbornness. I thought Master was lying to me. My senior and junior brothers have all left, and I'm the only one who managed to survive. I didn't expect Master's words to come true in the end. Kid, if I really do see your mother when I go down, do you want me to pass a message to her for you?" Hearing the old Taoist's suicidal words, Gohan almost kicked him down. However, Gohan's feet were suspended in midair. After waiting for a long time, he said, "Tell her that Henin is doing well outside. Tell her not to worry. No need for you to do anything. I'll go down myself." The old Taoist cupped his hands. "If there's a chance, I'll definitely pass it to her." With that, he leaped up and disappeared among the clouds. "I'm going crazy. I'm just an NPC. How can I run into the underworld? Guhan mocked himself and walked back to where he came from. System notification: 1 survivor has died. Remaining survivors: 754. Total number of dead survivors: 1. When Guhan returned to the Palace of Heaven, the atmosphere in the Palace of Heaven was instantly different. The Palace of Heaven, which had always been very noisy, was now terrifyingly quiet. Almost all the survivors had witnessed the scene of Guhan capturing the old Taoist and killing him. Their fear of death made them not dare to say a word. They were afraid that this demon would kill them too. If they knew that Guhan could only kill 3 people at most, they wouldn't be as nervous as they were now. The way the remaining Taoists looked at Guhan was completely different from before. Before, their gazes were filled with gratitude and respect. Now, their gazes were filled with hatred and anger. I killed 1 of you, but I saved 744 of you. Guhan glanced at the entire Palace of Heaven. Do you all hate me so much? Do I take saving you as a matter of course? Guhan's heart surged with sorrow. There was nothing more in the world than this. The hatred of taking away $1 from someone was far greater than the kindness of giving someone $100. Brother Military Governor, Little Chue supports you. At that moment, Little Chue, whose life had been saved by Guhan, broke free from his parents' restraint and jumped into Guhan's arms. That grandpa is so scary. Little Chue supports you, uncle. Thank you. Guhan kissed Little Chue's face and returned her to his anxious parent. Then, he strode out of the Palace of Heaven. Guhan understood that there was no need for him to be entangled with a bunch of data. Outside the Palace of Heaven, the battle was still going on. However, the main force of the battle had changed from the 3 sword ladies to Guhan. In the next hour, 90% of the Yuan-ko that appeared were killed by Guhan. Guhan vented all his dissatisfaction on these unlucky Yuan-ko. This made Shui Han and the other sword ladies feel very relaxed. They only needed to kill a few that slipped through the net. When Guhan killed the last Goblin Knight, there was only an hour left before the reinforcements from Yanjing City arrived. Guhan knew that the real enemy that he needed to deal with was about to arrive. The first to appear on the summit of Wudong Mountain was a patchwork monster. It was a type of undead monster. It was huge, about 5 meters tall and 4 meters fat, just like a football. It was hard to imagine how it could climb up the majestic Wudong Mountain with its size. Yuan-ko name: Patchwork Monster. Level: Ghost Level. Secondary World: Western Magical Beasts. Entry Dungeon: All Western Magical Beasts Faction Dungeons. Health Points: 2 stars. Attack: 1.5 star. Agility: ½ star. Demonic Power: None. Abilities: the giant sickle and iron hook in its hands, as well as the plague that it releases all over its body, are its lethal weapons. Ultimate move: Mince, Plague, Self-Destruct. Introduction: an important unit in the Western Magical Beasts faction. It is made up of the broken corpses of various creatures stitched together by necromancers. Because it has been treated with a large amount of preservatives, the patchwork monster always emits an unpleasant smell. Because it is a living thing, the patchwork monster does not feel any pain. It is not a big deal to have 1 or 2 pieces of flesh cut off. Because of its huge size, its health points are very high. Its defense is also very high, and it is often at the forefront of the battle to take all kinds of damage. Although it is not very smart, its iron hook is very accurate. It can hook the enemy into its body, and then use poison to consume the enemy's life. The sickle in its hand is a little clumsy, but its damage is very high. 1 hit can take away half of one's life. Ah, what a disgusting monster! It had to be said that the patchwork monster had a huge advantage that was not recorded in the handbook. Its extremely disgusting body was something that most women could not bear. Even the powerful famous swordswoman, King Yu, upon seeing the patchwork monster, was so disgusted that she bent over and retched, losing half of her battle strength. King Yu was like this, not to mention Shui Han, who directly vomited on the ground. Only the silent Yu Lingjian did not feel any discomfort. On the contrary, she seemed to be eager to try. King Yu, you go and deal with it. Gohan did not care about King Yu's disgusting body and ordered, the other swordswomen, do not interfere. Let King Yu deal with it alone. If Gohan did it himself, the patchwork monster would not be enough. Apart from the fact that its health was too high, which wasted a lot of time, it was not difficult at all. However, this patchwork monster that did not pose much of a threat was also a rare target. It was the best training target for King Yu. Okay. King Yu knew that Gohan wanted to train himself and did not want to show any fear in front of Gohan. She resisted the disgust in her heart, raised her King Yu sword, and slashed at the patchwork monster. What's that corpse sewn on its stomach? Why does it look like a woman's upper body? And it's an upper body without a head. The pair of oppies on the corpse are still flowing with disgusting green corpse fluid. King Yu could not hold it in and vomited. Seeing the enemy vomit in front of him, the patchwork monster did not hold back. He hooked the hook in his hand onto King Yu's waist and pulled her towards him. At the same time, the patchwork monster's stomach opened up like a man-eating flower. King Yu was hooked into the patchwork monster's open stomach. I shouldn't die. Gohan muttered to himself with some confidence. Chapter 78. Oh no, big sister King of Yu was eaten by Yuan Ko. Sword Maiden Shui Han exclaimed. She picked up her long sword and planned to save King of Yu. Although King of Yu used the aura of a superior sword maiden to suppress her from time to time, as a fellow sword maiden, she definitely wouldn't stand by and watch her comrades die. It's fine, don't go up. Just as Shui Han took a step forward, she was pulled back by Gohan. Gohan didn't even look at the stitched monster and said indifferently, "Don't worry about King of Yu, that stitched monster can't eat people." It only swallowed him for 5 seconds. Indeed, after 5 seconds, the stitched monster seemed to burp. Its stomach opened up again, and it spat out King of Yu. From the data, King of Yu only lost some shield energy and was hit by an insignificant plague buff. He didn't receive any fatal damage. However, from the outside, King of Yu was completely destroyed. The small leather armor on his body was in tatters. All sorts of organs and vegetable leaves stuck to King of Yu's body. There was also a large amount of white viscous liquid covering King of Yu's entire body. It felt like a scene from a movie from 1,000 years ago. It was just similar. If we want to judge how angry a girl is, we can observe her oppie. If her oppie is calm and doesn't change, then she is not angry. If her oppie starts to move up and down, then she is a little angry. If her oppie starts to shake up and down like a seesaw, then it means she is in a rage. If her oppie starts to vibrate like an electric motor, coupled with an inexplicable snort, then let me give you a friendly reminder. Hurry up and find a washboard to kneel down on. Oh, and remember to protect your face. Well, King of Yu was currently in a rage. Not only the oppie, but his entire body seemed to have turned black. Ha 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 ha, you dare to insult this king like this. If this king doesn't kill you, how can I rule over this vast country of you? While speaking, King of Yu's Go-Jian sword's tip emitted specks of starlight. It's over, King of Yu is going to use a skill. Gohan's heart skipped a beat. He had calculated everything and missed this. Although he had specifically warned King Yu not to use his skills, the humiliation he had suffered in the stitched monster's stomach had clearly caused King Yu's fury to erupt. Forget it. Let her be. Gohan thought about it and decided not to stop Yu Wang from using her skills. It wasn't good to hold back her anger and let her vent. As Gohan thought about this, he prepared King Yu's skill. He didn't shout out the name of King Yu's skill. He just stabbed the stitched monster with the tip of his sword. Yu Country Jian Yuan. Consumes 1% durability and 3000 sword cheese to push a target 1 kilometer away from you. Cooldown 15 seconds. The moment the skill was released, the stitched monster was shot out like a cannonball. After moving a distance of 1 kilometer, it fell down the cliff. Needless to say, in a place like Wudong Mountain, Yuang Xian Yuan's basic skill had directly transformed into an invincible sure-kill skill. In this world, there weren't many mountains with a diameter of 1 kilometer. He's dead. Seeing the stitched monster fall down the cliff, King Yu didn't react. He pinched his face in disbelief. It wasn't until the various mucus on his body was sucked away by the dimensional vortex that King Yu confirmed that the stitched monster was dead. This king succeeded in taking revenge just like that? King Yu was wondering if the stitched monster was dead. On the other side, Shui Han started to doubt his life. He was sent flying 1 kilometer away. Such a terrifying fact almost made Shui Han's worldview explode. Even Yu Ling, who had been very calm and expressionless, was so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth. Imagine the expression of a 2-meter-tall giant girl who couldn't close her mouth. You're not allowed to use skills later. Gohan walked to King Yu's side and smacked King Yu's head without hesitation. Despicable person. You actually dared to hit this king's head. King Yu turned his head angrily and wanted to take revenge on Gohan. However, he discovered that Gohan's face was terrifyingly pale. Hey, despicable person, what happened to you? King Yu felt that he might have done something bad. It's nothing much. I just used up too much sword essence. I feel like my body has been hollowed out. Gohan didn't know that he had said a famous advertisement line from 1,000 years ago. Gohan was speaking the truth. The sword essence in his body had indeed been hollowed out. King Yu's skills were very powerful. They were dozens of times stronger than the skills of ancient sword ladies. With one move, he easily killed the Ghost Yuan Co-stitched monster. If Shui Han had to deal with it, he probably wouldn't be able to defeat this stitched monster even with half his life. But at the same time, King Yu's skills consumed a terrifying amount of sword chi. A basic skill consumed 3,000 points of sword chi. Gohan only had 5,050 points of sword chi. King Yu's one skill would consume a large portion of Gohan's sword chi. Unfortunately, King Yu was a famed sword lady. Only famed sword wielders could use a sword lady. For famed sword wielders, they had at least 10,000 points of sword chi and 100,000 points of sword chi. It was more than enough for King Yu to use 3,000 basic skills. But for Gohan, a basic skill consumed half of sword chi. The advanced skills and ultimate skills consumed tens of thousands of sword chi. Gohan was an ancient sword wielder. If he wanted to control a famed sword lady's true power, he still had a long way to go. Then what do we do? Seeing how weak Gohan was, King Yu couldn't help but feel guilty and sad. Don't worry, the next wave should be the spirits. There's no need for high-intensity battles. It's just a bit of brainpower. Gohan paused and gave a new order. King Yu, Yu Ling, you two continue to guard outside. Later, there will be a small group of Yuan co-attacking. Shui Han, come with me into Skyward Palace. Me? Shui Han looked at Gohan in disbelief. You want me to go in with you? Get this straight, I'm not your sword lady. Why should I go in with you? Wait. King Yu heard this and became unhappy. Shui Han is right. Although I don't want to admit it, I am your sword lady. If there's anything, I will do it. What does it have to do with Shui Han? Gu Han frowned when he saw that the two sword ladies were not cooperating with him at all. He shouted at Yuan Kong, who was hiding behind him. Yuan Kong, let me borrow your Aqua Frost. Are you willing to use it? Yuan Kong will listen to military governor's orders. Shui Han, military governor, is trying to save everyone's lives. His orders are my orders. You just need to listen to military governor. Yuan Kong decisively sold Shui Han out. Shui Han was so angry that his nose became crooked. Just this once. Don't even think about ordering me around in the future. Gu Han agreed. The next person he had to deal with was his sword lady, the King of Yu. Considering that he had finally eased up his relationship with the King of Yu, Gu Han decided to deal with the King of Yu in a gentler way. Be good. King Yu, listen to me, don't make trouble. Gu Han said too much as if he was persuading his lover. It almost made Shui Han's gums sour. You. This king. Forget it. King Yu's face was extremely red. He babbled for a long time. In the end, he was unable to resist Gu Han's gentleness and was defeated, just this once. Don't leave me behind next time. After Gu Han left the Palace of Heaven, the room returned to its noisy state. The cries of children, the screams of women, and the curses of men were all connected together, ringing out like a ball. Quiet. Everyone, please quiet down. Yuan Kong, who returned to Palace of Heaven with Gu Han, saw this scene and immediately shouted to persuade everyone to quiet down. Unfortunately, it was useless. Yuan Kong looked at Gu Han helplessly, indicating that he was helpless. Gu Han sneered, picked up a small incense burner, and threw it at the center of the crowd. Who? Do you want to kill someone? What if it hits someone? In the Palace of Heaven, there was a hubbub among the crowded crowd. At the place where the small incense burner landed, several survivors who were almost hit jumped up and wanted to curse. As a result, they found that Gu Han was staring at them coldly, and they immediately became listless. The rest of the survivors also noticed Gu Han at this time, and immediately became silent. The whole scene was silent. Sorry, it's a bit rough to make you quiet down, but it's very useful. Gu Han curled his lips and walked to the center of Palace of Heaven. I'm here to tell you something. There will be a group of Yuan Ko attacking later. They are invisible and can't be detected, so I can't stop them from entering Palace of Heaven. What? Yuan Ko will come in? If he comes in, what do we do? Yeah, what do we do? Gu Han's words caused another commotion among the survivors. These Yuan Ko have no other ability but one. They can possess your bodies, control your bodies, and make you kill the people around you. As soon as Gu Han finished speaking, the originally densely packed Palace of Heaven miraculously loosened up, and more than half of the area was empty. These survivors had already formed a family unit, and were just leaning on each other, vigilantly looking at the others around them. Don't be afraid, everyone. I have a way to deal with these Yuan Ko, as long as you listen to my orders. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.